In this world, your entire societal worth is determined by a single, simple trait, the color of your eyes. That's because your eye color dictates your innate talent and your ultimate potential. And for those with amber eyes, it means you're considered the absolute lowest of the low. So, when this man reincarnated 200 years into the future, he now has the very same amber eyes that this new society considers trash. But 200 years ago, people told a very different story about those eyes. In fact, they were known as the most powerful eyes in existence. Back then, he was a man so powerful that even his own allies grew to fear him. Anticipating their inevitable betrayal, he devised a plan to send his soul into the future. His grand solution was to orchestrate his very own funeral. From there, he sealed himself inside a coffin, prepared to wait for 2 long centuries. When he finally awakens in the future, he shatters the coffin from within. Yet, he's shocked to find his once powerful body replaced with that of a small child. The moment he steps out of the coffin, he immediately senses a demonic presence. His gaze fixes on the doorway as that presence slowly draws near. Staying on guard, the boy begins casting a powerful spell. Instantly, magic circles flare to life all around his body. However, the person who walks through the door isn't a demon at all. It's an incredibly beautiful white-haired girl. Abel can only wonder just who this mysterious woman could be. But then she suddenly collapses to the floor, calling out his name, Master Abel. Through her tears, she confesses she has been waiting for him this entire time. The white-haired girl explains she has waited for this very day to come, and yet Abel tells himself that he has absolutely no memory of her. He racks his brain, desperately trying to recall any acquaintance who looked like her. That's when a fragmented memory suddenly flashes in his mind. It's a memory of his former comrade warning him that she was a demon and an enemy of humanity. The vision reveals that right after defeating the demon lord, Abel had saved this young demon girl's life. Back then, he argued that she was just a child and that killing her would change nothing. Returning to the present, Abel remarks that she used to cry a lot and is surprised she's come so far in 200 years. Hearing him remember, the girl just stares back at him in pure shock. He follows up with a smile and a proper greeting saying, "It's been a while, Lilith." Lilith's identity is confirmed, and she's overjoyed that she has finally found him. She explains that for over a century, she searched for Abel after he was expelled from the hero's party, and she did all of this simply to repay her debt of gratitude to him. Eventually, her search led her to the sacred cave where he would one day reincarnate. Abel reflects that time must have weakened the cave's barriers, as he never imagined a demon would find his hiding spot. He then prepares to ask Lilith about something strange he noticed. After all, in this world, a person's eye color is meant to be a direct reflection of their soul, so he has to wonder how she managed to discard her natural amber-colored eyes. He questions if she somehow accomplished a feat that even he, in his past life, could not. Lilith simply replies that it would be much faster to just show him. She calmly brings her hands to her face, leaving Abel to wonder what she's doing. With a quick gesture, her eyes suddenly change from blue back to a familiar amber color. She explains that these are called contact lenses. Abel is stunned, asking if such a change is truly possible with mere translucent sheets. You see, this world has a long and bloody history of discrimination and oppression against those with colored eyes. Countless wars have been fought and lives sacrificed over this simple matter of eye color. And now, Abel can hardly believe all that suffering could have been avoided with such a simple invention. Just then, Lilith approaches, calling out to her master Abel. She tells him she's prepared a house nearby as she gently wraps a scarf around his neck. It's to keep him warm, she explains, because it's quite cold outside. As they leave the cave, they are met with a vast, snow-covered landscape. In the distance, a small village sits nestled at the base of the mountain. They enter the house, and he is stunned to see an electric lamp for the very first time. But the real prize is the personal library, holding 200 years of knowledge that he has yet to learn. Knowing his love for reading, Lilith reveals a special space prepared just for him. These books, she explains, are the most efficient way to learn about the present, and Abel can only thank her for such a thoughtful gift. Flipping through the first volume, Abel can't help but remember that just 200 years ago, books like these were the greatest luxury in existence. His reading quickly reveals that this modern era is powered by a magic stone capable of transforming various types of energy. Suddenly, the strange lamps throughout the house make perfect sense. They must be a byproduct of these very magic stones. But Abel wonders why they'd automate things so easily done with magic, arriving at a simple conclusion: modern mages have gotten lazy. The more he reads, the more his suspicion is confirmed. The skill level of mages in this era has completely plummeted. In fact, what this book calls innovative magic was nothing more than common knowledge 200 years ago. And to make matters worse, the book is filled with magical formulas that are utterly and completely wrong. Any mage using these formulas as a basis for their magic would be building a fundamentally flawed technique. So flawed that any spell cast this way would fail 100% of the time. It's undeniable. While their technology may have advanced, their magic is in total decline. Just as he processes this, a sudden noise from the door shatters his concentration. Those approaching footsteps don't sound like Lilith's, so where could she have gone? Before he can ponder it further, a figure leaps into the room, shouting for his attention. The blonde-haired boy arrogantly tells the commoners to rejoice. He introduces himself, then boldly declares that starting today, Abel will be under his personal guidance. Unimpressed, Abel simply returns to his book and declines the offer, stating he has no interest in being his student. But the boy refuses to take no for an answer, insisting that Abel become his disciple. Growing tired of the noise, Abel rests his hand on a nearby book. He then coldly advises the boy to stay away, a command that leaves the intruder speechless. With his own eyes beginning to glow, Abel asks if he understands what they mean. Stumbling back in shock, the boy can only exclaim about his eyes. Abel confirms what should be his greatest fear, explaining that these are the very eyes related to demons. Yet instead of fear, the boy Ted points in sheer excitement, shouting that they're the legendary amber eyes. He then collapses in a fit of laughter, celebrating that he's finally seen them in person, that they actually exist. Completely baffled, Abel can only wonder why on earth Ted isn't scared. Just then, a stern voice from the doorway calls out for Ted. A well-dressed man enters the room, scolding Ted for barging into someone else's house. But this only makes Ted more excited, as he calls out to the man, "Boss Niken." Ted scrambles back to his feet, urging his boss to look. He points directly at Abel's eyes, calling them chick eyes and gushing about how he's never seen them before. The man, whose name is actually Bass, calmly says he understands, recalling that Lilith mentioned her talented brother was moving in. But after a quick glance at Abel, Bass concludes he must have set his expectations far too high. That's when Ted eagerly explains that the so-called chick eyes have zero aptitude for any magical attribute. Apparently, they can't use water, wind, creation, or healing magic. With a cheerful grin, he concludes they are completely powerless. A statement that comes as a complete shock to Abel, because in truth, the amber eyes simply require an enormous amount of training to use. For the first 10 years of that training, a user can't properly use any magical attribute whatsoever. But after that decade of hardship, the user gains perfect control over all attributes. They can even execute the highest level magic of every single attribute in existence. Abel vividly remembers how these same eyes were once persecuted in his time. And yet, there was never any doubt that they were exceptionally powerful. Back in the present, however, Bass just tells Ted not to exaggerate. He then patronizes Abel, saying that people can lead fulfilling lives even if they can't use magic, for now. Bass is certain they'll find a way to help each other, insisting that they all just get along. This is unbelievable. The man thinks the amber eyes are useless, yet still expects Abel to look after these two clowns? Then, turning to Ted, Bass invites him home to learn magic, because the chosen ones need to fulfill their destiny. Left alone once more, Abel can only reflect on their sheer audacity to barge in, insult him, and then casually leave. His gaze drifts back to the history books on the table, and it all starts to click. According to the war history he was just reading, there hasn't been a war with the demon race for at least 100 years. And because of this, the world has been enjoying an unprecedented period of peace. Without the threat of fearsome demons, people no longer had any reason to fear the amber eyes. On top of that, with magic itself in steady decline, the long and arduous training period for the amber eyes now seemed utterly pointless, so they became seen as the most useless, most ridiculous thing in the modern world. And so Abel realizes the bitter truth. In his time, his eyes brought persecution, but in this era, they bring only ridicule. Is it even possible to live a normal life in a place like this? His question is answered moments later when he sees Lilith and has to ask what her new job is. He guesses servant, but she happily corrects him. The proper term is now maid. Posing, she asks if she looks good in the uniform, and he has to admit she does. And in that moment, it all clicks. He finally understands why she went to such great lengths to hide her real eye color. It's a stark reminder of just how much the world has changed in the 200 years since his reincarnation. After all, his own amber eyes, once a symbol of prestige, have now become a target for ridicule. Sensing his thoughts, Lilith explains that in those 2 centuries, the demon race lost all its former power. After his own hero party defeated the Supreme Lord, humanity mercilessly continued to hunt down any remaining demons. And as a consequence of this newfound peace, the overall level of mages declined drastically across the world. Hearing this, Abel turns to Lilith and asks a difficult question. As a demon, does she resent humans for what they did? But her answer isn't one of bitterness. Instead, she reminds him that Abel-sama has always protected her with all his might. She recalls how he traveled far and wide with her just to find a safe place for her to finally live in peace. On top of that, he even taught her magic and the rules of human society just so she could blend in. Stepping closer, she confesses that for everything he's done, she's deeply grateful and admires him more than anyone. So, she continues, if he's truly that worried about her, she has just one humble request. Which is how, moments later, Abel finds himself sharing a bath with her, wondering how things ever ended up like this. She apologizes, explaining that his concern just made her so happy she couldn't hold back her feelings. Stunned, Abel asks if she truly understands the implications of a man and a woman bathing alone together. Lilith, however, just finds it amusing, since his youthful appearance robs his words of their weight. Even so, she admits that hearing his concern makes her very happy. The reason, she reveals, is that someone like Abel-sama has finally acknowledged her as a proper woman. The awkwardness only escalates later that night when he and Lilith end up sharing the same bed. And yet, for the first time in over 200 years, Abel experiences a true, profound sense of peace in his sleep. From then on, his days fall into a comfortable routine, always starting with a peaceful breakfast with Lilith. Afternoons are spent in the library gathering information, but noon always brings a very specific interruption. Right on schedule, the library door bursts open. In storms, a young noble named Ted, loudly announcing his presence to tiny eyes. Abel just sighs, figuring the pompous noble wants a playmate and prepares to tell him he doesn't have time for kids. But instead of talking, he opts for a much faster escape route by simply jumping out the window. In an instant, Abel is already running across the snow-covered rooftops. From the window, all Ted can do is stare in utter disbelief. That was only a fraction of his body enhancement magic, yet it was more than enough to completely shock the boy. Unwilling to be outdone, Ted yells from the window that he can do that too. And with a great reckless leap, he throws himself right out of the library window. From a distance, Abel notes that the boy can, at the very least, use some body enhancement magic. However, his fundamentals are a complete mess, causing him to leak far too much unrefined mana. At this rate, he's wasting too much energy and will never make the jump. A moment later, that prediction comes true as Ted is heard screaming while plummeting from the sky. He then crashes hard into a patch of bushes just below. With a heavy sigh, Abel approaches and asks if he's okay. Suddenly, Ted bursts out of the bushes with a defiant shout. He charges straight toward Abel, screaming not to be underestimated. But unable to control his own momentum, Ted slams face first into the wall of a nearby house. As the boy complains about the pain, Abel can only remark that he's surprisingly tough. Ted furiously demands to know how a subordinate can be so arrogant, but Abel reminds him he never agreed to be one. Just then, an idea sparks, and Abel approaches Ted, saying that if he insists, he'll finally become his subordinate. The sudden change in motivation leaves Ted completely shocked. But Abel is quick to clarify that he'll only do it on one very specific condition. This scarf, he explains, is a valuable item in their village where it snows for half the year. He tells Ted that if he can manage to take it from him, he will gladly become his subordinate. Of course, Ted boasts that just taking a scarf sounds way too easy. For Abel, this is perfect. Since Ted is going to interrupt his studies anyway, he might as well get some training in. Leaping to a nearby roof, he decides to use this chance to assess the mages of the current era, leaving Ted stunned once again. Refusing to be left behind, Ted declares he can use enhancement magic too, and jumps right towards Abel. But just like before, he completely misjudges the distance and slams right into another wall. Watching from the rooftop, Abel reflects that the difference in their power levels is simply too vast. And yet, the boy refuses to give up, struggling back to his feet. With a shout for him to wait, Ted resumes the chase across the rooftops. Abel can't help but find this persistence surprising. After all, Ted should have realized by now just how inefficient his physical enhancement magic truly is. But Abel continues to leap around effortlessly, without using any magic whatsoever. Meanwhile, the boy stubbornly pushes onward. He pours every last ounce of his strength into the chase, until he finally trips, falling face first onto the tiles. Utterly exhausted, Ted gasps out why Abel isn't tired, to which Abel thinks it's because their very foundations of training are worlds apart. Sunset is still a long way off, Abel points out. Are you giving up already? That single question fuels a desperate lunge, as Ted drags himself across the roof to grab him. His movements, however, are far too slow. So Abel easily dodges the grasping hand, leaving the boy baffled. Finally, with his energy completely spent, Ted admits he can't go on. He collapses face down, with not an ounce of strength left to even move. Abel reflects that he'd only expected the boy to last 5 minutes, but holding on for a full 20 certainly proves his noble blood. With the basic physical training apparently done, Abel decides it's time to head back to the library. But just as he turns to leave, something inside the house catches his attention. Peering through the window, he spots Lilith in what looks like a serious conversation with a man named Bass. To get a better listen, Abel uses physical enhancement magic to sharpen his hearing. And what he overhears is Lilith telling this man, Bass, that, just as she's told him countless times before, she can't be in a relationship with him. When Bass demands to know what's wrong with him, Abel quickly realizes this is a conversation about love. For a proud noble like Bass, he deduces, being rejected by a woman must be a massive blow to his ego. But Lilith calmly explains that it has nothing to do with any dissatisfaction she has with him. The reason, she reveals, is that her heart already belongs to someone else. Up on the rooftop, this revelation catches Abel completely by surprise. Down below, Bass immediately demands to know who this rival could possibly be. He even asks if, by some twisted chance, it's her younger brother Abel. And with a radiant smile, Lilith confirms that he is exactly right. This leaves Bass utterly shocked, wondering how she could possibly fall for her own brother. He erupts, screaming that Lilith is an immoral woman who should be ashamed of herself. Outside, the words immoral and ashamed echo in Abel's mind, because the truth is, he isn't actually Lilith's brother at all, which means she must be using their sibling relationship just to make her rejection story more convincing. Even so, from his perch on the roof, Abel decides this base character is really starting to get on his nerves. Still, feeling a sliver of pity for the guy, he ultimately decides to pretend he saw nothing. From that day forward, Ted began chasing him across the rooftops every single day, always shouting for him to wait. And as this daily routine continued, watching the boy led Abel to a certain conclusion. Ted's ruby eyes are supposed to grant him mastery over fire magic. Yet for all that potential, he shows no particular skill with his primary element. Mastering elemental magic, after all, is a challenge if you can't grasp complex magical syntaxes. A task Abel concludes is far too difficult for someone as straightforward as Ted. And yet, Ted still pours magic into his feet, desperately trying to catch up. It's in watching this that Abel realizes the boy does have an aptitude for something: physical enhancement magic. This type of magic doesn't require complex logic, but relies on raw, primitive, sensory intuition, which makes it a perfect fit for Ted's simple, straightforward mind. Just then, with a powerful shout, Ted lunges. In that moment, Abel sees it. The boy has definitely improved over the last few days. From a nearby window, Bass watches the scene unfold, stunned by what he's witnessing. While Bass can't believe the boy's skill, Abel simply thinks that 200 years ago, anyone could have reached this level. That's why he's able to block Ted's punch with ease. "You've only improved a little," he comments before striking back. "An attack like that," Abel claims, "would only annoy a fly." And with that, the force of the blow sends Ted flying across the snowy roof. He hits the slick tiles and lies completely motionless. But as he struggles to get up, his feet slip on a patch of snow, and he lets out a yelp of surprise. In an instant, his footing is gone, and Ted plummets from the edge of the roof. The sudden fall catches even Abel off guard. Down below, lying in a heap in the snow, Ted groans about how much it hurts. Abel reflects that while he's no expert in recovery magic, his own ability should be more than enough for an injury like this. But before he can act, a voice cuts through the air as Bass comes running, shouting to ask if Ted is alright. Shoving Abel aside, he announces that He will be the one to use recovery magic on Ted, right now. Abel can only watch, surprised that even without the fabled gray eyes, Bass is somehow capable of using healing magic. For a moment, as Bass casts his spell, Abel almost admits that he might have underestimated the guy. But just as he thinks that, something about the magic itself seems deeply, fundamentally wrong. That's when Ted's screams intensify. Instead of mending the wound, the healing is only causing him more agony. To understand why, you have to think of recovery magic like building with blocks. The more advanced the spell, the more intricate and delicate those blocks become. Normally, to avoid a total collapse, a mage starts with the largest blocks and gradually moves on to the smallest. Bass's technique, however, is like stacking a large block on a small one and just using glue as reinforcement. A sloppy, rushed, and dangerous job. Abel instantly realizes that connected this way, the magic is grinding the boy's nerves together and will absolutely lead to serious complications. So he urges Bass to stop immediately and take the boy to the infirmary for proper treatment. Bass, however, completely snaps, screaming that he never asked for his opinion while accusing him of pushing Ted in the first place. He then stalks right up to Abel's face, spitting that he's nothing more than a commoner. And Ted, he explains, is a nobleman, the legitimate second son of the prestigious Langobard family. With a sneer, Bass calls him a country bumpkin with a pair of inferior eyes. and for that insult to a nobleman, he swears he will make Abel pay. His hand falls to the hilt of his sword, a clear warning that he shows no mercy to the insolent. Then, with his sword finally raised, Bass roars, questioning how a commoner dares to tarnish their honor. Weapon now fully drawn, he surges forward, officially challenging Abel to a duel. On top of that, a crowd has gathered, drawn in by all the commotion, but even with an audience and faced with a blade, Abel simply agrees to the fight. So Bass lays out the rules, a one-on-one duel where the first to surrender loses, mockingly offering an advantage because of Abel's age. For a moment, Abel just listens to the condescending proposal in silence. Then he flatly refuses, stating there's no need for an advantage because he just wants to get this over with. After all, he feels partially responsible, and more importantly, they need to get Ted treated as quickly as possible. This calm refusal only enrages Bass further, who demands to know how much longer Abel plans on insulting him. And with a furious shout, he unleashes the first attack from his sword, the Windblade. Yet as the attack screams toward him, Abel isn't panicking. He's studying it, analyzing the very nature of the technique. The moment he sidesteps the blow, he has to admit, the man is slightly faster than he thought. That same attack then strikes a tree just behind him, slicing it clean in half on impact. Still, Abel reflects that while the power was average, the spell's construction was impossibly quick. In fact, he recalls that 200 years ago, only he was capable of casting magic at that speed. But something doesn't add up, because Bass is clearly not a skilled mage, which can only mean one thing. The strange sword must be the reason. There has to be some kind of trick to it. Seeing his contemplative look, Bass just scoffs, asking if this is his first time seeing a regalia. He boasts that thanks to this very regalia, he can activate magic at an overwhelming speed. As Bass prepares his next move, Abel just stares, the pieces finally clicking into place. He now understands that the sword has a power source built directly into it, which means this so-called regalia is nothing more than a well-made toy. There's simply no other way to put it. Oblivious to this, Bass leaps into the air, screaming for everyone to behold his true power. And a barrage of energy blades comes hurtling down towards Abel. But at this point, Abel considers the whole situation ridiculous. He has no more time for this charade. So, in one swift, unbelievable move, he swats the entire attack away with his bare hands. Bass can only stare in utter disbelief, stammering how anyone could possibly block magic with their hands. And in that moment, Abel realizes something profound. The introduction of these regalia was one of the main reasons for the decline of mages' abilities. Quite simply, the regalia had robbed mages of the need to actually think. So, as a token of appreciation for this little test, Abel announces he's about to show Bass what TRU magic looks like. Immediately, a dangerous light begins to glow in Abel's eyes. He then begins to weave a complex spell with his hands, the likes of which Bass has never seen. As dozens upon dozens of energy blades materialize from nothing, Bass is left utterly stunned by the sheer scale of the attack. Before he can even process it, one of those blades slams square into his chest. The force of the blow sends him flying backward, knocking him hard against the ground. Of course, Abel added some flashy effects just to emphasize their difference in skill, but in truth, he was still holding back considerably. Sprawled on the ground, Bass can't comprehend it. How could he, a nobleman, lose to a commoner with such inferior eyes? But before he can even finish that thought, a blur of motion rushes straight for him. It's Lilith, and she lands a solid, brutal kick right across his face. This new blow sends him flying once again, rolling helplessly across the stone floor. Looming over his defeated form, she makes one thing perfectly clear: she won't forgive any more insults aimed at her Abel-sama. Stepping toward the bully, Lilith addresses him directly as Bass-sama. Then, with her eyes glowing ominously, she poses a single, terrifying question: is his life precious? Utterly terrified, all Bass can do is stammer out her name in response. But seeing the sheer killing intent radiating from her, Abel is forced to intervene, yelling for Lilith to stop. Sometime later, a doctor delivers grim news to Ted, informing him that his leg will take a full 6 months to recover. That diagnosis leaves the boy in despair, wondering if he'll really be stuck in bed for half a year. But that very night, while Ted is fast asleep, a magical portal silently tears open inside his room. Through it steps Abel, who had initially decided to leave the boy's treatment to the medical mages of this era. It was meant as a test of their skill, but a 6-month recovery time was simply far too long. So now, standing before the sleeping boy, he prepares to use his own, far more powerful healing magic. Instantly, a green magical circle materializes over Ted's injured leg. Abel's first step is to completely purge the crude, lingering magic that Bass had left behind. He then enhances the healing by magically reconnecting the bones, all while regretting that he couldn't prevent the fall in the first place. In that moment, he admits to himself, he had been caught completely off guard. And as his healing magic finally finishes its work, Abel quietly asks the sleeping boy for forgiveness. The very next day, as Abel leaves the library, he comes face to face with an unexpected person. It's Bass, who stands there looking just as shocked to see him. Before a word can be exchanged, another man suddenly yells at Abel, questioning how he dares address Bass-sama so casually. Yet before this man can continue, he gets smacked hard on the back of the head. An older man is holding him down, turning to Abel and politely stating it's a pleasure to finally meet Abel-sama. This man introduces himself as Evans Langibard. Leaving Abel utterly confused, Evans says that he would like to deeply apologize for the recent situation. He then does the unthinkable, bowing low and begging Abel to forgive his foolish son. His son Bass is absolutely outraged, screaming about why his father is bowing to a commoner with inferior eyes. He yells that Abel is nothing more than the brother of a maid they hired. Without a word, Evans lands a heavy punch right on his son's head. He growls that it's his own fault for not explaining things sooner and demands that Bass finally listen. And that's when Evans bellows the shocking truth. It is Lilith-sama who employs them. This revelation hits Bass like a physical blow, leaving him completely stunned and speechless. Watching this drama unfold, Abel finally starts to understand the true power dynamic of the household. Now it all makes sense, why a high-class demon like Lilith would ever pretend to serve mere humans. After that day, Abel never saw Bass again. According to Evans, the boy was promptly enrolled in the prestigious Isekai Magic Academy, a well-known school famous for one thing, training the absolute most elite mages. Later, on a snowy day, Evans sits Ted down to tell him something important about their family's past. He recounts a time years ago when he was hunting in the forest, only to be suddenly ambushed by a monster. Just as he thought his life was over, he was saved at the very last second. And the one who saved his life was none other than Lilith-sama. With just a single, powerful blast of energy, Lilith had completely obliterated the monster. Since that fateful day, Evans explains, Lilith has helped their family in countless ways, acting as both a good neighbor and a life mentor. Hearing this, the word mentors quietly echoes in the young boy's mind. His father advises him to get along well with their neighbors, to which Ted agrees, saying he was planning to anyway. In fact, with a bright smile, Ted declares that to him, Abel is already like a disciple and a great friend. Fueled by this new understanding, the boy rushes back to his room, deciding he needs to properly apologize and thank Abel. He then bursts into the library, joyfully declaring, "I'll be in your care again, master." And so, as Abel gradually adjusted to this world 200 years in the future, he enjoyed peaceful days alongside Lilith. In what felt like a blink of an eye, about 2 years passed since he awoke from the reincarnation magic. Those 2 years have made a difference, as an older Ted now proudly shows off his progress with a powerful burning bullet spell. Watching on, Abel comments that he has improved a lot, which only gets Ted more fired up. Ecstatic, Ted says this praise is the perfect boost for tomorrow's entrance exam, suggesting they pass the Magic Academy's test together. At this suggestion, Abel just stares at him for a moment, completely silent. Faced with the absurd proposal, Abel finally asks a simple question. Why would he ever need to take an entrance exam for a Magic Academy? After all, 200 years ago he was revered as an unparalleled genius, with no one even coming close to his level. Taking his confusion back home, he asks Lilith why he'd need to go to an academy, but she just turns the question back on him. What's his plan if he doesn't enroll? With absolute confidence, he proudly reveals his grand plan to travel the world as an adventurer. But that's when Lilith drops a bombshell. The entire adventurer profession was abolished 10 years ago. With the number of demons having declined so drastically, the job is now considered completely unnecessary. So, Lilith asks, is his plan now to find work using his magic? Because in this new age of peace, she explains, doing so is impossible without graduating from an academy. Abel can only reflect on the irony that even 200 years ago, there wasn't a single person alive who could teach him anything about magic. Sensing his frustration, Lilith teases him, asking if he'd rather just depend on her forever, leaving him flustered, embarrassed, and with no easy answer. Defeated, he asks her to stop and agrees to take the exam. He decides this is a chance to broaden his horizons and resolves to be optimistic. The prestigious Isekai Magic Academy is in Midgard, the capital city. As soon as they arrive, a student comments on the boy wearing a uniform with no family crest. Another asks if he's the famous Inferior Eyes, and laments that even the Isekai Magic Academy has fallen this low. One of them states that commoners should stick to farming, while Abel assumes they're students. The boys then comment that they heard he got into the academy through a donation from a rich family. Ted then defends him, asking if judging by eye color is the only thing they know how to do. Suddenly, a girl appears and asks them if they have no shame. She then scolds them for ganging up to badmouth a commoner. She declares that this is low, even for nobles. The crest on her clothes then glows for a moment. Seeing it, Abel feels like he's seen that family crest before. One of the students confronts her and asks who she is, to which she replies that her name is Eliza. She then declares she is a future great mage who will graduate at the top of the academy and make a name for herself. The students ask if she's also a candidate and threaten to teach her how to speak properly. Eliza stares them down and tells them to try their luck. With a swift movement of her sword, Eliza easily throws them off balance. Next, she points her weapon at them and asks who's really lacking in good manners. With that, Eliza orders them to get out of her sight immediately. After the commotion, Eliza turns to leave, which catches Abel's attention. He then tries to touch her shoulder to get her attention. Eliza asks how a commoner like him dares to touch her, but admits that he has guts. Abel, however, says he was just trying to thank her, which leaves her confused. She yells at him not to get the wrong idea, as she simply hates people who badmouth others behind their backs. Eliza then warns him that if he wants her attention, he must become stronger. As she walks away, Eliza declares she's only interested in the strong. Ted wonders what's with that girl, but Abel thinks he didn't expect to meet someone with such a strong will. The Assyria Magic Academy entrance exam has two parts, a written test and a practical test. The written test included general knowledge, magical language, and magical engineering. For Abel, the general knowledge content wasn't much different from 200 years ago and was surprisingly easy. He then comes across question 12, which asks to prove that the human soul cannot be created through magic, based on Depornicus's final theorem. Abel figures they're probably doing this to stop students from getting a perfect score, but that's too bad for them. He smiles because the person behind Depornicus's final theorem is none other than himself. That afternoon, the students gathered in the school's courtyard. An instructor then announces that they will use their regalia for the practical exam. A voice instructs the examinees to select a regalia that matches their eye color. Next to Abel, Ted Langebart is thrilled by the instruction. Ted turns to Abel and urges him to pick one, saying the weapon should match his eyes. There are naturally no regalias for amber-colored eyes. So Abel decides to just grab a red regalia, figuring the one-handed sword seems safe enough. She points to the targets, revealing they are made of dark matter that absorbs magic. As soon as the instructor calls for volunteers, Ted shouts that he'll go first. Watching from a distance, Abel wonders if he'll really be okay. When given the signal to start, Ted Langebart focuses on the regalia in his hand. A moment later, he opens his eyes and shouts the name of his spell, Fireball. With that, the boy launches a single stream of magic towards the sky. Abel, for his part, just watches, dreading the inevitable outcome. He concludes that this is awful, but deep down, he had already expected it. The small fireball finally hits the center of the target with minimal impact. Despite the result, the instructor and the other candidates react with total disbelief. Contrary to expectations, the instructor suddenly shouts that what she saw was incredible. She turns to Ted and questions how a talent like his could end up in the general admissions. Other candidates in the crowd comment that it's unbelievable, wondering how anyone can compete after a spell like that. Completely shocked, Abel wonders if Ted's magic is really considered worthy of praise in this era. Soon after, another candidate casts his spell, Windblade. Next, a female student uses her magic, firing an ice needle at the target. To Abel, the rest of the exam seemed like complete child's play. A voice then announces that, last but not least, the next examinee is up. The instructor turns and asks if examinee number 27, Abel Kuhn, will take the exam. As he stares at the woman, Abel reflects that she, like the other candidates, probably thinks mages with amber-colored eyes can barely use magic. He believes his invitation was just out of consideration. The instructor gives the signal for Abel Kuhn to begin as he walks toward the field. As he raises the sword, the boy wonders what exactly he should do now. He decides to accept Ted's challenge, but he'll add a little something extra. A candidate comments that he's taking too long to build a fireball, which is typical for someone with inferior eyes. With the spell almost ready, Abel mentally sets the projectile's speed to maximum. He then increases the power level to high and adds an additional spell formula for Scattershot. If the target is made of dark matter, Abel decides now that his eyes are open, he will release his power's limiter. He finally casts his spell, Fireball Slicing Rain. With his sword raised, an immense amount of magical energy begins to form around him. The spell is then unleashed, creating a massive explosion that spreads across the field. The crowd reacts in complete shock, with one of the candidates shouting that it's huge. Abel watches the spell, knowing it's not just about being big. The energy shoots into the sky as a gigantic pillar, stunning everyone. Ted and the other candidates look up, dumbfounded by the scale of the power. A moment later, the pillar breaks apart into hundreds of projectiles that rain down over the entire target area. Ted, on the other hand, celebrates with a huge smile, shouting that that's his master. Looking at the completely devastated area, Abel thinks that maybe he overdid it a little. However, he concludes that this should at least clear up some misconceptions about amber-colored eyes. The scene then shifts to another practical exam location, where other candidates are continuing their tests. There, a girl named Eliza casts her spell, Fireblade. With a swift motion, she unleashes a powerful slash at her target. The strike hits the center of the target with a burst of energy. Despite the result, Eliza finds the situation tedious, wondering if they're really impressed by so little. Suddenly, another instructor rushes over, telling Professor Fidea there's an emergency. Eliza quickly uses a physical enhancement spell to improve her hearing. She overhears that the dark matter target was completely shattered by someone with amber eyes. The revelation leaves the girl in complete shock. Eliza glances in Abel's direction, sees the wasteland around him, and wonders if they're talking about that commoner. Clenching her fist, she decides the situation has just gotten much more interesting. Meanwhile, in an academy hallway, Ted celebrates excitedly, saying he got an A, the same grade as his master. Abel muses that being put in the same category as Ted is a bit questionable, even if there is no higher grade. With that, Ted opens a large door, announcing they've arrived at the waiting room for A-rank examinees. Upon entering, they find themselves in an amphitheater where the other candidates are already waiting. The other students start whispering, wondering if he's the one with amber eyes who destroyed the target. Suddenly, a sharp voice calls out to him, breaking the silence. Eliza approaches and confronts him directly, asking if it's true he shattered the target during the practical exam. Abel recognizes her as the girl from this morning, while Ted points at her and yells in shock. Completely ignoring the reaction, she presses Abel, demanding to know how he constructed that spell. She continues, asking if he trained under a renowned mage, since amber eyes aren't supposed to be suited for any attribute. Eliza insists that dodging the question is pointless, as his skills will be revealed in the next test anyway. The argument is cut short when Professor Fidea orders everyone to be seated for the final exam briefing. She then reveals that the final exam will be a practical test simulating a duel. Sitting beside Ted, Abel repeats the word duel to himself, processing the information. With that, he realizes what Eliza meant earlier when she mentioned the next test. The professor begins explaining the rules, stating that the duels will be one-on-one. She clarifies that the loser will be the one whose protective magic is destroyed first. Furthermore, the instructor explains that opponents will be decided based on practical exam results, pairing those of similar strength. Moments later, in an outdoor arena, the professor announces that the first match is about to begin. To no one's surprise, Abel finds himself facing Eliza, just as he expected. She challenges him to draw his weapon and get on with the fight. Abel informs her he won't be using a weapon as he isn't skilled in combat with a regalia. With a smirk, Eliza asks if he's choosing to fight the old-fashioned way, adding that it's fine by her. She then draws her own sword and challenges him to show her what he's got. In midair, Eliza finishes her sentence, demanding he show her his true strength. Abel watches her rapid advance, noting her impressive speed. However, a faint aura of energy begins to form around his legs. But at the very moment of impact, Abel vanishes with a light tap on the ground, leaving his opponent stunned. From the audience, Ted can't contain himself, shouting encouragement for his master's slick move. Back on the field, a slow smile spreads across Eliza's face as she imbues her own sword with magic. Interesting, she declares, before unleashing her own spell, a ferocious fireblade. Yet Abel sidesteps the incoming attack with almost casual ease. Then, surrounded by his own crackling aura, he invokes the exact same spell, Fireblade. His version, however, is a colossal wave of energy that surges directly towards her. All Eliza can do is watch in disbelief as the overwhelming counterattack rushes in. That's when the two fireblades collide, engulfing the entire arena in raw, untamed power. The resultant explosion is immense, its shockwave reverberating throughout the area. And when the dust finally settles, it reveals a battlefield of utter devastation. Amidst the quiet, Abel suddenly realizes that Eliza's presence has completely vanished. Cautiously, he walks through the thick smoke, a single thought crossing his mind. Did he overdo it? But just then, Eliza bursts from the smokescreen with a ferocious battle cry. He understands in an instant she wasn't gone, she was just hiding her presence for a surprise attack. It's a decent strategy, he concludes, but her plan has one fatal flaw. With his hand raised and ready, Abel declares she chose the wrong opponent for this kind of tactic. He then unleashes his own spell, invoking a burning bullet. To Eliza's shock, he conjures not one, but 12 searing fireballs with impossible speed. Every single one of the 12 projectiles slams directly into her, creating a massive impact. Watching from the crowd, even Ted has to admit the power gap between them is just too wide. Back in the rubble, Abel finds himself genuinely surprised. Even after taking a direct hit like that, she is still eager to fight. And despite all the damage, Eliza uses her sword as a crutch, pulling herself back to her feet. Seeing the protection magic completely destroyed, Professor Fadia announces that the match is officially over. Yet Eliza immediately interrupts, her voice ragged but firm, insisting it's not over. She declares that even if the exam results are already decided, she begs them, pleads with them, to please let her continue the duel. That's when Abel realizes this isn't just about the exam. This incredibly stubborn girl is fighting to prove her own worth. With immense difficulty, she rises to her feet and vows to prove to him that she is strong. This makes Abel ask her why she's so obsessed with strength in such a peaceful era. He can't help but reflect on how different this is from 200 years ago, the time he came from. In this new world, after all, people can live happy lives without needing to be strong. But Eliza immediately retorts that this so-called peace is nothing more than an illusion. She asks if he really, truly believes 100 years have passed without a single conflict. International treaties, she argues, don't guarantee that war can't happen again. In fact, she reveals their neighbor, Kuldrya, is quietly building its army for a great war. On top of that, who's to say monsters aren't still lurking somewhere out in the world? Gripping her sword tighter, she declares that she refuses to be complacent in this false peace. She yells that this is precisely the reason she needs to become strong. And with her remaining strength, she finishes by vowing to rebuild the house that raised her. That last declaration immediately snags Abel's full attention. In a final desperate effort, Eliza begins to invoke her ultimate spell, Physical Flame. A massive torrent of fire energy suddenly erupts from her entire body. From the crowd, Professor Fadia recognizes the technique instantly, calling it Flame Armor. But Eliza reveals the true name of the forbidden magic she's using is Matter Rose Sky. She then uses those very flames to propel herself, moving freely through the air itself. A shocked Ted can only yell that it's impossible, realizing she is actually flying. Charging forward, Eliza declares she will win this and warns him to be prepared. With blazing wings of fire, she circles high in the sky, preparing for her final attack. Ted Langobard wonders aloud if that could be aviation magic, a technique he thought was just an urban legend. Abel knows better, reflecting that aviation magic requires a delicate balance of multiple attributes. He recalls that even in his original era, only a few rare individuals could ever hope to master it, which means it must have taken tremendous, unbelievable effort for someone with ruby eyes like Eliza to learn such a technique. And with that, a sudden, chilling realization dawns on Abel. He deduces this magic wasn't just learned, it was a legacy, left for the future of her family. From high above, Eliza taunts him, asking if he's ever seen her special technique before. Quite the opposite, actually, Abel corrects her, a sudden calm in his voice. As his own hands begin to glow, he states that he now understands her family's situation completely. After all, he never imagined a unique magic from his own time, 200 years ago, would be passed down to this day, completely unaltered. He supposes her stubbornness comes from her ancestors, but notes the technique consumes life force. After his analysis, Abel concludes that the verification is complete. He immediately points his finger at Eliza and invokes a counterspell. A powerful beam of energy shoots out, striking Eliza and making her scream from the impact. Struck head-on, Eliza is stunned at the spell's speed, cast instantly after analyzing her magic. The counterspell demonstrates its unparalleled effectiveness by neutralizing her magic. The girl screams in confusion as her powerful spell shatters into pieces. Without her magic wings, Eliza plummets in a terrifying freefall. Abel immediately propels himself upward in a powerful leap. In a single swift move, he catches the falling girl in his arms. While holding her, he calmly asks if she's a descendant of Maria, the heroine of fire. The unexpected question leaves Eliza blushing and completely speechless. After landing, Abel praises her skills, comparing her favorably to her ancestor and encouraging her to keep improving. Professor Fadia quickly announces that the winner is examinee number 27, Abel Kuhn. From the stands, Ted Langobard lets out a massive cheer, celebrating his master's victory. Ignoring the celebration, Abel simply turns and begins to walk away from the arena. However, other candidates block his path, congratulating him on his incredible and cool performance. Eliza watches the crowd swarm Abel, wondering what on earth just happened. The girl finally gives in to her exhaustion and collapses onto the ground. In a room at the academy, an instructor points out that 3 geniuses, Ted, Eliza, and Abel, could elevate the academy's standards. Another man slams his fist on the table, calling the idea of 3 geniuses absurd. He turns and confidently states that there is only one true genius, Abel Kuhn. The first instructor argues back, noting that despite his power, Abel is a commoner with amber eyes. The man sighs, thinking that these teachers are a lost cause and need to relearn everything. He picks up Abel's exam paper, stating that what makes him incredible isn't just his magic. He then reveals to the astonished instructors that the boy perfectly solved Copernicus's final theorem. The instructor explains that few magic researchers even understand the theorem. He then reveals that Abel even improved upon it, a feat worthy of national recognition. Suddenly, a booming laugh echoes through the room as a new figure approaches. The newcomer is identified as the headmaster, who notes they seem to be making a fuss over the examinees. Professor Emerson turns to him, excitedly saying, "The boy is incredible despite his amber eyes." He declares that the boy, whose name is Abel, has the potential to become the greatest mage and carry the country's future. Upon hearing the name Abel, the headmaster reacts with such profound shock that he looks like he's choking. Startled, his dentures fly from his mouth and clatter to the floor. With great difficulty, the headmaster asks Professor Emerson to repeat the student's name. The instructor confirms that the examinee's name is indeed Abel Kuhn. The headmaster recalls that this boy got perfect scores on both exams, making him the greatest genius in the academy's history. Later that night, the name Abel echoes through the academy halls in a tone of disbelief. The headmaster's path is suddenly blocked by an enchanted suit of armor that serves as a guard. The armor then moves aside, revealing a hidden, secret passage in the wall. The passage leads down to a door marked with an ornate magical symbol. Upon entering his private office, he immediately seals the door with magic. He then casts an unlocking spell on one of the drawers of his desk. The spell reveals its contents, an ancient sealed letter. With a flick of his wrist, he uses magic to make the letter float into his hands. As he grasps it, the letter's ancient seal breaks, releasing its contents. The letter unfolds, and the first words revealed are, "Dear descendants." It continues, stating the author's wish to pass on the truth of the world only to his descendants. The letter reveals that the official story of the four great sages defeating the Demon Lord is completely wrong. In fact, the author confesses that all four of them together couldn't even lay a finger on the Demon Lord. The letter states that the truth is, the one who truly defeated the Demon Lord was a lone mage with amber-colored eyes named Abel. The author concludes the letter by lamenting that this incredible truth will likely be buried in the shadows of history. The headmaster reflects that he heard this exact story so many times from his late grandfather that his ears might as well have calloused over. The legend spoke of a fifth sage, lost among the great four, a man with eyes like the demons. Despite his overwhelming power, that man suffered terrible persecution. As a result, he never left his name in the annals of history. The headmaster finishes the letter, pondering that no matter how great a mage is, living for 200 years should be impossible. Dismissing this as a mere coincidence would be a grave mistake, which means he needs to gauge the boy's power for himself. The day after the tumultuous entrance exam, finds Abel quietly enjoying a drink in a Midgard cafe. But that peace is shattered when Ted Langebard bursts in, shouting for his master. With a triumphant smile, he shoves his letter forward, proudly announcing that he passed. The boy then holds the envelope out to Abel, asking if he wants to see the results. But without even looking, Abel replies that there's no need, he already knew. He points to the envelope, noting the clear signs it's been opened. Besides, knowing Ted's personality, he would never have shown up this cheerfully if he'd failed. Caught red-handed, Ted just slaps his book on the table, eager to know the next step. Just then, Ted glances to the side, asking who their other guest is. From behind the sofa, the top of a red-haired head slowly emerges. It's Eliza, who jumps up in recognition, exclaiming that they're the guys from the exam. While she enthusiastically calls it a coincidence, Ted immediately identifies her as the girl with the aviation magic. She just smiles, claiming she comes to this cafe for its amazing cupcakes. Yet as Abel sips his drink, he knows that's a lame excuse. She must have followed Ted here. So he puts his cup down and bluntly asks what she really wants. Eliza hesitates, saying it's not what she wants, but that she was wondering something. Finally, she asks which class he ended up in. She quickly justifies the question, admitting there's a lot she could learn from him in her own quest to do her best. Before Abel can answer, Ted asks his master if he can tell her, since it'll be public soon anyway. And with a huge smile, the boy reveals that both he and Abel are in Class A. Even Abel finds this strange, wondering what benefit there could possibly be to them being in the same class. But upon hearing the news, Eliza is ecstatic that they're all in Class A together. Moments later, she's humming happily as she turns and leaves the cafe. Ted is left completely confused, but Abel figures she's just anxious about making friends. Their conversation is cut short when a woman in a maid's uniform enters the cafe. While Ted shouts in surprise, Abel simply turns, confused by her sudden arrival. In response, the newcomer, Lilith, only offers a subtle smile. Then, with a wink, she strikes a pose to show off her new outfit. Recognizing her instantly, Abel's first question is about that very uniform. And with a radiant smile, Lilith announces that as of today, she's a new professor at the Assyria Magic Academy. Ted explodes, questioning how that's possible, but Abel isn't surprised at all. He just rests his head on his hand and says he understands completely. After all, when Lilith decides to do something, her long life has made her exceptionally good at getting it done. Leaning in close, she whispers that from now on, she'll be there to support him as his professor. Fast forward to the day before the entrance ceremony. Walking through campus, Lilith points out the student dormitory. She explains the academy is a fully residential, 5-year system. But just as quickly, she says her goodbyes, explaining she has her own rounds to do as a new professor. As Abel and Ted reach the dormitory entrance, Abel turns to speak. Before he can get a word out, a voice interrupts, correctly guessing they're new students. The woman introduces herself as Professor Fidir, the one in charge of the first-year building. Abel recognizes her from the exam, a fact that completely blindsides Ted. Already knowing their names, Fidir hands over their academy-issued uniforms. She explains that while clothes are casual inside the dorm, this uniform is mandatory for going out. But holding the fabric, Abel notices something isn't quite right. He asks her directly, "This uniform, it's enchanted, isn't it?" The professor is impressed, he noticed, confirming it's enchanted for magic and dirt resistance. When Abel asks who did the work, she simply says it was a contractor assigned by the academy. A moment later, Ted peeks out from his room, asking if the uniform caught his master's interest. Abel is deep in thought. Enchantment magic is, after all, a specialty of the black-eyed mages. It's a magic that can enhance the very properties of an object. But looking at this, he can only conclude the work is third-rate at best, a complete waste of good materials. That's when he declares to a confused Ted that he's going to re-enchant it. And on second thought, he decides he might as well borrow Ted's uniform to fix it too. Without another word, he begins his work, covering the outfit in glowing runes. The moment Ted puts his on, he cries out in shock at how incredibly light his body feels. Abel simply comments that thanks to the good original materials, the process was faster than he expected. With one down and one to go, it's now time to take care of his own. In that case, Ted declares, he'll use his luggage for a Manju diplomacy mission. With a burst of enthusiasm, he confirms this, holding up a box from his bags. Opening it reveals the snowball manjuice, a famous specialty of the Langobard family. Abel can't believe all that luggage was just for sweets, but Ted simply encourages him to try one. After a bite, however, Abel comments that for something so renowned, the taste is just average. Undeterred, Ted grabs the box, explaining that he's going to hand them out to the neighbors. After all, he's absolutely determined to make 100 new friends. And with a quick goodbye, he dashes out of the room to start his mission. Left alone, Abel has to admit that if anyone could make 100 friends, it would be Ted. But as for himself, all he really wants is to graduate in peace. With that thought settled, he applies his own enchantment magic to his uniform. Once the adjustments are complete, he looks at the newly enchanted outfit on his bed. But enchantment magic consumes a lot of energy, and feeling drained, he decides to take a quick nap. His rest is shattered, however, by a shout of "preposterous," echoing from the hallway. Out in the hall, a student is yelling angrily, questioning if someone is trying to insult them. A confused Ted can only reply that it wasn't an insult, he just wanted to make friends. That's when Abel opens his own door, asking what's wrong and if his Manju diplomacy has already failed. The group's leader just sneers, asking who would want to be friends with someone as filthy as a poisonous perch. Poisonous perch. Abel repeats the strange phrase to himself, a flicker of recognition in his mind. Watching from his doorway, he recalls reading about that very term in one of his books. The venomous perch, as he remembers, is an invasive freshwater fish species whose population exploded in urban rivers. Because of its strong reproductive abilities and omnivorous nature, the species completely disrupted the country's river ecosystem. It all started when Ted offered the boy a manju, a flavor from his hometown he was proud of. However, the student just shouted for him to shut up, slapping the sweet treat right out of Ted's hand. As the manju hits the floor, the aggressor curses him again, spitting that he stinks. From his doorway, Abel can only watch the scene unfold, thinking how utterly terrible it is. On top of that, he wonders if these guys were never taught not to waste food. But just as Ted bends down to pick up the sweet, a new voice cuts in, saying, "If you insist." To everyone's surprise, it's Eliza, who crouches down and says she'll take one. Then, with a single bite, she starts eating the very manju she just picked up from the floor. The action leaves the boys aghast, while Ted can only stare, completely stunned. After tasting it, the girl calmly rates the sweet, giving it about 70 points. It's not bad, she comments, but she wishes it had a more unique local flavor. The group of boys reacts with pure disgust, shouting that she ate off the floor, and that this is why they hate venomous perches. With an annoyed glare, Eliza turns to them, her voice dangerously low as she asks what they just said. Seeing where this is headed, Abel decides to step in, telling them all to just drop it. Even Ted tries to de-escalate the situation, insisting that it's fine and he doesn't mind. He also thanks Eliza for her help, but she just fires back, questioning if he has any pride at all. That's when it all clicks for Abel. He recalls Lilith mentioning something about discrimination among the nobility. He remembers her explaining that the academy has internal students, those who came from a preparatory school. And, in addition, there are the external students who pass the difficult entrance exams on their own. With that, the boy makes the connection. Venomous perches must be the derogatory term for external students. Changing tactics, one of the students then asks about the so-called master that Ted keeps mentioning. The group leader immediately latches onto this, asking if it's the one with the inferior eyes. The implication that his master has a magic-less, inferior eye leaves Ted completely frozen in shock. But that shock instantly ignites into pure rage, and Ted explodes, yelling for them to stop bad-mouthing his master. In the very next moment, he lunges forward, grabbing the group leader by the collar. His face is a mask of fury as he demands that the boy apologize. Right now. For Ted, this is personal. He remembers the day he met Abel, laughing as he pointed at his amber-colored eyes. Back then, he'd exclaimed with pure joy that it was the first time he'd ever seen chick eyes. But the memory is shattered by a sudden punch straight to Ted's face. The student yells that he's disgusted, calling Ted a pestfish and demanding he let go. One of the other students then rushes forward, trying to break up the fight and telling Ted to release his friend. Yet watching it all, the boy can only wonder if Ted is mocking them, since he wasn't even fazed by the punch. Even Eliza is taken aback, surprised by her classmates' incredible resilience. That's when a dangerous magical aura surrounds the aggressor's hands as he prepares a real attack. The blow lands head-on, but instead of hurting Ted, the magic ricochets, striking the aggressor and his companions instead. The redhead, Eliza, can only watch in shock as the bullies are suddenly sent flying. All three land flat on their backs, completely baffled by what just happened. That's when Abel reveals it's just a simple physical reflection enchantment, one that only triggers on violent contact. He adds with a smirk that while simple, it was certainly effective against them. But Ted turns to Abel, buzzing with excitement, exclaiming that the bullies went flying without him even laying a finger on them. He asks if it's amazing, wondering aloud if his inner power has finally awakened. Abel, however, deadpans that it's not his power, especially since everyone involved, including Ted, is pathetically low level. Just then, Eliza approaches them and asks if she can take a closer look at Ted's uniform. Peering at the fabric, she stares in disbelief, admitting she's never seen such a masterfully crafted enchantment. In a burst of pride, Ted blurts out that his master made it, boasting that Abel is a prodigy with enchantment magic. Abel immediately grabs the boy, clamping a hand over his mouth and hissing at him not to say anything unnecessary. Yet even as Abel tries to silence him, Eliza turns and asks directly if he's the one who created the enchantment. Ignoring her question entirely, Abel just grabs Ted and starts dragging him down the hall. She's left stunned in his wake, wondering not only how he cast that spell, but realizing the number of magic formulas on that uniform was anything but normal. As he's being dragged, Ted asks why they're running away and if Abel is just shy, only to be told to shut up. It's only then that she remembers she came to invite them on a tour of the dorm and completely forgot to ask. Soon after, the day of the entrance ceremony arrives at one of the academy's grand towers. But inside, Abel and Ted are desperately sprinting down a long hallway. Abel can't believe it. Their school life has barely started and they're already late for the ceremony. Ted, panting an apology, explains he couldn't sleep because the pillows were different, revealing a surprisingly delicate side. Exhausted, the two finally reach an imposing door, sighing in relief that they made it. But as Abel approaches, he notices something unusual. The door is integrated with a complex magic formula. With just a single glance, his eyes trace and analyze the intricate enchantment runes. It takes him only a moment to figure out it's some kind of welcoming gesture for the new students. So, a mischievous idea forming, Abel turns to Ted, telling him that he'll open the door, but Ted has to go in first. A terrified Ted immediately asks if the door is going to zap him with an electric shock for being late. Abel just tells him he'll understand once he's inside, but Ted frantically insists he's not ready. Ignoring his protests, Abel just shoves him straight through the door, saying it's no big deal. That powerful push sends Ted stumbling into the room and sprawling onto the floor. He looks up to see rows of toy soldiers suddenly spring to life, playing their instruments. Abel calmly follows him in and closes the door, commenting that whoever designed this whole spectacle has some very strange taste. At that moment, the entire hall lights up, revealing a grand celebration complete with confetti, music, and dozens of animated dolls. Ted, completely lost in the sudden chaos, can only shout out in confusion, to which Abel calmly replies that it's nothing all that special. He explains that it's just a simple enchantment designed to activate a mechanism. This whole reception, he says, activates in response to the magical power of whoever opens the door. And as an impressed Ted gawks at the dolls, a student in the crowd points directly at the blonde kid. Another student notes with awe that he activated all of the door's sound sculptures. They wonder if they're witnessing a once-in-a-decade talent, since even the legendary Knight's March started playing. From her seat in the very same crowd, Eliza silently watches the whole spectacle unfold. Nearby, students whisper that the blonde must be a special external student, and the amber-eyed guy is probably just his sidekick. The instructors, observing the scene, come to the same conclusion, declaring Ted a true genius among the freshmen. That's when a voice from a balcony above rings out, commenting that it seems they'll finally get to hear the Knight's March this year. The man introduces himself as Mikhail, the academy's headmaster, and calls for silence. Sitting in the audience, however, Abel's attention is fixed on something else entirely, because he instantly realizes that this headmaster is a descendant of Roy the Wind Hero who once helped defeat the Sovereign. Abel reflects that it's been an incredibly long time since he last heard the name Roy. As the headmaster continues his speech, Abel's mind drifts back 200 years, to when he was part of the very same group as Roy. They fought side by side to subdue the Sovereign, and back then, Roy was like a younger brother to him. Now he can only watch the man's descendant from a distance, lost in the memories of a distant past. Ted suddenly points out that this information was in the pamphlet, but Abel simply replies that he wasn't interested enough to read it. Later, after the ceremony, Ted turns to his master and asks if he's okay, having noticed he seems a bit off. Abel just brushes it off, saying it's nothing as he continues walking down the hall. But then, his eyes snap wide with a sudden, chilling realization. He freezes dead in his tracks, causing a worried Ted to call out his name. This sensation, it isn't from a living being. Is it a regalia? Or has someone somehow discovered his true identity? Out of nowhere, Abel feels a strange gaze boring into him from somewhere in the classroom. Could someone have already discovered his true identity? But the magical power is faint, almost as if the watcher is using a regalia to mask their presence. Nearby, a student turns to his classmate, asking if that's the same blonde boy they faced before. Indignant, his green-haired friend questions what he just implied. He insists it was just a simple enchantment that sent them flying, yet the girl beside them points out that charm magic shouldn't be nearly that powerful. That's when Eliza recalls the resonating doors from the entrance ceremony, betting it's all connected. Before they can discuss it further, Ted Langobard suddenly yanks Abel by the arm, dragging him into the center of attention. While Ted comments on the palpable tension, Abel calmly replies that for him, this kind of situation is quite common. Just then, the classroom door slides open and a new figure steps inside. One of the students gasps in shock, completely unable to believe who their new Class A advisor is. With a heavy thud, the professor drops a stack of books onto his desk. Another student cries out his name, Professor Emerson. Offering a casual wink, the man confirms his identity, leaving the entire class astonished. Unfamiliar with the name, Abel asks if he's famous, and Ted immediately confirms it. He explains that Emerson isn't just famous, he's a candidate for executive of the Kronos Magic Society, known as the strongest mage of the modern era. Hearing this, Abel finally places the name. This is the man frequently mentioned in modern magical engineering texts. For a mage of this era, he concludes, Emerson is actually rather competent. Ted then leans in, mentioning a rumor that this very professor was responsible for the magical engineering section of the written exam. That single rumor makes everything click into place for Ted. It's why the test was so brutal. And for Abel, the situation finally starts to make sense. Ignoring the chatter, the professor announces he's skipping roll call, and formally introduces himself as Emerson, the teacher in charge of Class A. Immediately, a student raises her hand, saying she'd heard he was far too busy with his own research to teach a class. Emerson confirms she's absolutely right, admitting that honestly, his own research is all he truly cares about. So why become a professor? As Emerson explains, the title simply makes it easier to secure government funding. But there's another reason he's here. There's something specific he needs to check. And with his gaze fixed directly on Abel, he says there might be something, or someone, he wants to observe in this very class. It's the same gaze from before, the one he felt watching him. Despite the odd start to the semester, Abel's new school routine is mostly satisfactory, and he even finds time to talk with Lilith. However, he has to admit that if he were to point out one single problem, it's that the classes themselves are unbearably boring. In fact, the lectures are so terribly pointless that he secretly uses the time to advance his own magical research instead. After all, with just a pen and paper, he can conduct his research from anywhere. But his quiet work doesn't go unnoticed. From the front of the room, the white-haired professor spots something. He calls out, "Mr. Abel," challenging him to come solve the problem on the board. A smirk plays on the professor's lips, thinking of the sheer nerve from a student with inferior eyes who dares to not pay attention in his class. It's a ridiculous and petty attempt to publicly embarrass him, and Abel knows it. So, standing before the board, Abel decides he might as well make the solution easy enough for everyone else to understand. Without another moment of hesitation, he quickly starts writing the solution across the board. Once finished, he explains that the magic formula can be simplified in at least 10 steps using existing shorthand. Seeing the elegant solution, the professor's smirk vanishes, replaced by a look of complete shock. Grinding his teeth in quiet fury, the professor can only manage to tell Abel to sit back down. As he walks back to his seat, Abel can't help but think the professor is nothing more than a show-off. But from a nearby desk, a classmate clicks his tongue in disdain, muttering that Abel is the real show-off. Another student chimes in, criticizing him for being a lower eye and questioning why he's even studying magic. Despite their bitter comments, Abel decides to simply ignore the taunts. Later, to continue his research, he heads to one of Assyria Magic Academy's 5 libraries, home to a vast collection of books. Because the main location is always crowded, Abel has a system. He borrows the books he needs from there, and then takes them to one of the smaller, quieter libraries to read, figuring the extra effort is worth the peace. Just as he settles in, a familiar voice comments on the coincidence, catching his attention. It's Eliza, who remarks with some surprise that he's studying here as well. Confused by her surprise, he asks what she means, pointing out that libraries are naturally good places to focus. She then asks about his homework, but Abel replies that he handles all of that in his room. In fact, he adds, it only takes him a few minutes before bed to finish it all, which leaves her completely stunned. While Abel continues to write, a curious Eliza moves closer to get a better look at his notes. Her eyes scan the page before she points to a specific part of the problem he's solving. For a long moment, Eliza just stares, silently analyzing the impossibly complex formula he's written down. To solve it, she advises him to consider the problem's 2 formulas by looking at the first and last parts separately. With that little hint, Abel launches into a detailed explanation of the complex problem. Following his logic perfectly, Eliza points to the notebook, already forming the correct solution in her head. That's when it hits Abel her mind is unbelievably quick, with 100 times Ted's adaptability and comprehension. Later, as they walk home at dusk, Eliza thanks him, commenting on how easy his explanation was to understand. But then, her curiosity gets the better of her, and she asks if all he ever does is read books in the library. A little confused, Abel wonders if that's weird, but she assures him it's not, she just has a question. She wants to know why, despite living in a bustling city, he never seems to go out and explore. After all, she argues, there's so much more to experience outside the academy walls. Yet as she lists off restaurants, fruits, and sweets, Abel can't help but point out that she only mentioned food. Eliza insists there's more, baiting the hook with something she knows will catch his attention: secondhand bookstores. In those places, she explains, you can find rare and cheap books, a thought that makes Abel pause and consider. Sensing her chance, she smiles and suggests they go out together on their next day off as a way to thank him. To her delight, Abel casually agrees, and just like that, their outing is officially set. But their plans are cut short when the same group of students from before appears, mockingly calling him Master Kun. The trio immediately takes an intimidating stance, completely blocking their path forward. Completely unfazed, Abel simply asks what he can do for them. The blue-haired student just scoffs, telling him to stop showing off and acting so superior. On top of that, he accuses Abel of using money to get in, questioning how a lowly lower eyes was ever admitted. Smirking, the green-haired boy draws his weapon, declaring they're going to redo his entrance exam for him. He then taunts him directly, asking what Abel will do now that Ted isn't here to protect him. Next to him, Eliza gasps in surprise, recognizing the weapon is a regalia. Before she can say more, Abel cuts her off, turning to the bullies with a question of his own: why do they despise external students so much? The question only makes the boy angrier, and he yells that it's about knowing your place, that passing one exam doesn't make them equals. He rants that while they dedicated their entire lives to their studies, Abel just waltzed in acting like he owns the place. After hearing them out, Abel calmly acknowledges their dedication and then says he has a question for them. In the very next instant, he suddenly tosses his bag high into the air, and in a blur of motion, he lunges forward, asking if they seriously plan to fight with such inferior equipment. His explosive speed leaves the trio of students completely shocked and utterly speechless. Even Eliza can only watch the scene unfold, her expression one of pure astonishment. By the time the student even realizes what's happening, Abel is already holding his regalia, leaving him to wonder when it was taken. With the weapon now in his hand, Abel asks if they even bother to maintain their regalias. He points out that the material has degraded, causing critical distortions in the weapon's magical structure. Then, he contemptuously tosses the regalia back, telling them that if they want to be mages, they should at least care for their tools. As the humiliated student collapses to the ground, Abel simply asks Eliza to get his bag so they can finally leave. Left stewing in his own rage, the student punches the ground, muttering both Ted's and Abel's names under his breath. He screams that he'll make them both pay, vowing to embarrass them in tomorrow's class. The very next day, Ted Langabard's excited shout echoes through the hall. It's finally time for PE. A few moments later, Abel arrives to find that everyone has already gathered out in the courtyard. Their professor, Cantor, announces they'll be playing a game called Hound, something neither Ted nor Eliza has ever heard of. But as soon as Cantor starts explaining, the green-haired student from yesterday interrupts, claiming they all know the rules. The professor just laughs it off, telling the boy that he's not quite understanding the situation. With a knowing smile, he clarifies that the class must be adapted for those who are unfamiliar with the game. The green-haired student readily agrees, commenting that this will only make things more interesting. That sinister remark immediately puts both Ted and Eliza on high alert. Eliza, however, just flashes a defiant smile, saying she'll be happy to teach these troublesome insiders a lesson. While Ted cheers her on, Abel can't help but think that while he's used to this treatment, it must be hard on them. That's when the professor announces he's going to divide the class into teams and begins calling out names. With his arms crossed, Abel watches as the professor systematically forms the first few teams. And, just as predicted, the final team, Team D, is composed entirely of students from outside the academy. Ted Langabard, completely oblivious, cheers with excitement, happy to be on the same team as his friends. For that, Eliza calls him a carefree meatball, a nickname he clearly doesn't understand. She has to explain that he's a meatball for not noticing that every single member of Team D is an outsider. Another teammate quickly chimes in, noting that this team formation feels like a deliberate target on their backs. Worried, a female student admits she's always been terrible at sports, and her classmate agrees, stating he's much better at intellectual tasks. As the others also confess their weaknesses one by one, Abel can only think to himself what an unreliable group this is. And though Eliza tries to cheer up her classmate, the girl can only express her fear, because the students from inside the academy are not looking at them kindly at all. "We'll fight them fair and square," Eliza declares, determined to make their opponents eat their words. But Abel knows this won't be easy. Their opponents look exactly like the type to play dirty. His fears are confirmed when the green-haired student approaches Master Kuhn, wishing him a good game. He then adds with a smirk that he'll be making up for what happened the day before. And that's when Abel understands even the PE teacher is in on their plan. The game itself is called Hound, where a team of 3 attackers, or shooters, faces off against defenders. These defenders, known as rabbits, are split into 2 teams that play in 5-minute rounds. To attack, shooters use a special glove-type regalia that fires energy projectiles. The shooter's only objective is to hit the rabbits and take them down. On the other side of the field, the rabbits just have to focus on dodging those attacks. As Ted comments that it's just like dodgeball, the rules clarify that the team with the most survivors wins. The game starts, and Ted easily dodges a projectile, exactly what Abel expected from the loud kid. But just moments later, one of his teammates isn't so lucky and gets hit square in the back. Now, this attribute less magic might have low power and isn't lethal, but as Abel knows, it's still magic, and a direct hit is gonna hurt. Even when Ted blocks a subsequent attack, he knows that without body enhancement magic, the impact will definitely sting. Not far away, Eliza shows off her own impressive agility, easily dodging a projectile aimed at her. Suddenly, Abel's focus is broken as he finds himself targeted by 2 projectiles at once. An attack this direct is surprising, but he reacts instantly. Yet as he ducks, both projectiles swerve away from him completely. That's when he realizes it was a feint. The real targets were his teammates, who were just hit by 2 other projectiles. With absolutely no time to react, both students are taken out simultaneously. Eliza can only watch in shock, unable to process what just happened. But Abel's expression hardens. He knows for sure now that these guys are up to something. Enraged by the blatant foul play, Eliza screams at the opposing team. "You're cheating," she accuses them directly. From her reaction, Abel realizes Eliza must have also noticed the irregularity in the projectile's flight path. He now understands completely. They've added a target tracking syntax to their non-attribute magic, which means their shooting gloves were illegally modified just for this match. In response, the green-haired student just scoffs, telling her to stop talking nonsense and demanding proof. This blatant gaslighting only makes Eliza more furious, and she yells right back at him. Before she can lunge at them and get disqualified, Abel quickly holds her back. He calmly explains that distracting an opponent with words is a fundamental battle tactic. Focus, he warns her, pointing out that they're also being shot at from the sides right now. Flustered but grateful, Eliza can only thank Abel for snapping her out of it. But just then, a teammate yells a desperate warning to Eliza about an attack from behind. Because of that warning, Eliza manages to dive to the ground just in the nick of time. She looks up to thank Yukari for the save, who receives praise from another teammate for the call-out. Watching her, Abel notes that despite being so timid at first, Yukari is putting in a surprising amount of effort. A moment later, Yukari warns Ted about another attack, and Abel realizes her calmness and wide view of the game are compensating for her lack of physical skill. He concludes that if she could just overcome her timid personality, she has the potential to become an excellent mage. But it's at that exact moment that several projectiles are fired simultaneously, all of them heading straight for Yukari. With no way to escape the coordinated strike, she's hit head-on by the entire volley. The sheer force of the impact throws the poor girl forcefully to the ground. Yukari, Ted shouts in worry, watching her fall. It dawns on Abel that they've deliberately targeted the team's spotter, a cruel but clever move. The green-haired student only boasts, yelling that she was a nuisance and that the slow ones should just get off the field. Yet as a wounded Yukari struggles to get up, she's hit again. In the chaos, another one of their teammates is also hit and eliminated from the game. "What are you doing?" Eliza demands, her voice filled with outrage. With a sickening smirk, the green-haired student feigns ignorance, asking what she could possibly mean. His own teammate chimes in, saying they're just removing some invasive species. And to prove their point, they hit Yukari yet again, causing her to scream in pain as she's slammed back to the ground. Eliza rushes to help, screaming for them to stop since Yukari is already down and out. But the student simply argues there's no rule against attacking a fallen rabbit while the game is still on. And taking full advantage of her distraction, he attacks her directly, sneering that her guard is wide open. The impact sends Eliza flying hard to the ground, with Ted screaming her name in horror. Ted leaps to his feet, shouting an objection right at the professor. He points, insisting that the last attack never should have counted. But before he can even finish his sentence, a projectile slams straight into him. He's thrown violently to the ground as Eliza screams his nickname, Pudge. From across the court, the green-haired student mocks them, sneering that all the outsiders are useless. Defeated, Eliza and Ted can only endure the humiliation. And nearby, their teammate Yukari cowers, completely intimidated by the whole situation. After just 2 minutes of play, only one rabbit is left standing on their team. Abel stands alone in the center of the court, their last survivor. The green-haired boy smiles victoriously, asking his team how they should finish this. With only one target left, their leader rallies them for a final assault. He gives the order to crush Abel, and his teammates all fire at once. A massive barrage of energy attacks streaks across the court toward the lone player. But after they've gone this far, Abel decides he's not about to just let them win. He moves in a flash, effortlessly dodging the very first projectile. Then, with an agile spin, he weaves right through another incoming attack. From the sidelines, Ted and Eliza are cheering him on, yelling for him to dodge everything. Yet the green-haired boy is already out of breath, wondering why Abel isn't tired yet. Completely calm, Abel simply replies that he isn't. Suddenly, an opponent shouts that there's only 1 minute left, shocking their leader. Now pressed for time, the green-haired boy resorts to one last, desperate strategy. The three of them begin to channel their power together for a massive combined attack. That's when a shower of colorful energy projectiles begins to rain down on the court. Terrified, Eliza and Ted can only scream Abel's name. He immediately recognizes they've added a scatter syntax, an obvious violation of the rules. His opponent boasts that there's no way he can dodge this, but Abel knows he can. However, dodging would be far too flashy and would reveal his true abilities. So he decides that what he's about to do is also a violation of the rules. After all, since they were the ones who started cheating, he has no other choice. With full authorization, Abel activates his powerful counter magic. He sits down to disguise the ability, pretending to be in trouble as a hidden barrier deflects every shot. His teammates on the sideline can only watch in stunned silence. The opposing team is equally shocked, completely baffled by what just happened. The green-haired student just stares at his malfunctioning glove, wondering if his regalia is broken. Just then, the professor blows the whistle, signaling the end of Team B's attack phase. His impressed teammates immediately run over, congratulating him for surviving all alone. But as Ted celebrates, Abel sharply tells him to shut up, reminding him he's the only one left. He knows it will be their defeat if they can't secure a win on this next attack. This fires Eliza up, who declares she's about to show them her true skills. The opposing leader just scoffs at their pointless encouragement. As one of his teammates vows to destroy the sewer dwellers, Abel realizes they must have a plan. And right on cue, the professor blows the whistle, starting the second phase of the match. Immediately, the opposing leader orders his team to use the phalanx formation. In response, all his players quickly gather into a tight defensive cluster. Ted fires a shot, yelling that they've just made themselves one big target. At the same time, Eliza unleashes her own attack, declaring she'll crush them all at once. But both their projectiles are easily blocked by the team's defensive formation. Another player shouts a warning about a disc-type projectile coming from the side. When the team easily blocks that attack too, Abel finally understands their strategy. By having everyone monitor a single direction, they're sharing information to eliminate all blind spots. While Ted begs for help, Abel simply admires the perfect execution of a true phalanx formation. Eliza grows frustrated, complaining that even her stronger magic power can't get through. That's when the enemy leader taunts Abel, asking if he can't even manage a simple pincer attack. Abel scoffs that that's just the basics, then calls out to Ted. "Hey Ted," he says calmly, "come over here for a second," leaving his teammate completely surprised. Leaning in close, Abel tells Ted that he will be their key. But from across the field, the green-haired boy watches their hushed exchange, his eyes narrowing as they glance his way. That's when Ted raises his arm, beginning the incantation, "Holy Spears, descend from the heavens." The opposing team can only look on, utterly clueless as to what's unfolding. And then, under his breath, Abel continues the chant. Confused, Ted glances at Abel, wondering why the chant is so long. Still, he holds out his hand and continues the incantation, "Gather in my hand." With eyes now fixed on the enemy, he roars the next line, "Unleash the power of the abominable void." At the same time, Abel calmly whispers the final keyword for his own spell, "Russet," before shouting the final command for all to hear, "Tempest." Instantly, the spell activates, and Ted screams as an immense power erupts from him. A shower of golden energy spears rains down on the enemy team, their own screams of pain and surprise filling the air. The impact is so devastating, it knocks down every single opposing player at once. All their leader can do is lie on the ground, lamenting his team's sudden, total defeat. And from the sidelines, the professor observes the outcome of the match in complete, calculating silence. That silence is immediately broken by Eliza, who shouts at the top of her lungs in celebration. She rushes over to congratulate Ted, demanding to know why he hadn't used such an amazing power before. He can only offer an awkward smile, replying that it was a total fluke. Nearby, Abel watches on, satisfied that his plan to focus all the attention on Ted has worked perfectly. But the victory isn't celebrated by everyone. The green-haired student staggers to his feet, utterly humiliated. He simply cannot believe he lost to a mere outsider. That's when Abel approaches him, saying there's something he needs to understand. He explains that Ted stayed in the game through his own skill and effort, a fact that leaves his opponent completely speechless. Of course, Abel knows he can't give Ted all the credit for that last move, but he absolutely acknowledges his friend's worth. He remembers just how hard Ted studied and trained for the entrance exam. Abel saw every ounce of effort his friend poured in just to get here. Faced with this, the green-haired student can only lower his head and clench his fists in silence. But then, a hand is held out to him in a gesture of friendship. It's Ted. With a wide smile, Ted declares that yesterday's enemy is today's ally, inviting him to eat manju together. The green-haired student just stares at the outstretched hand, clearly reluctant to accept. Yet Ted doesn't give up, insisting that they should be friends. Eliza even chimes in, asking what his problem is since Acorn himself already apologized. Ted, however, happily notes that at least his hand wasn't slapped away this time. He takes this as a win, concluding it's already a step forward in their new friendship. And despite his own team calling him hopeless, Ted remains committed to his grand goal of making 100 friends. All the while, Abel watches the entire scene unfold with a slight, satisfied smile. Meanwhile, in a luxurious academy hallway, an imposing figure walks with purpose toward a particular room. With nothing more than a simple touch, his magic undoes the seal on the door. Inside, Professor Emerson apologizes for the mess and invites the visitor in, addressing him as Mr. Headmaster. The headmaster immediately points to a monitor, noting that Emerson has been watching the same scene on a loop. On the screen, the recording shows Ted, his energy concentrating just before the blast. And then, the moment of impact, the powerful explosion he unleashed. Stunned, the headmaster demands to know what that power was, to which Emerson confirms he noticed it too. A sly smile crosses the professor's face as he explains it's an incredible form of disguise magic, one that very few would ever spot. With his eyes locked on the screen, Emerson declares that he will uncover that student's true identity. Later, on the day of his promised outing with Eliza, Abel gets ready to head into town. As he heads for the exit, his gaze falls upon the front desk, where Lilith is organizing some papers. He casually asks if she's the one in charge today, and she looks up, greeting him with a hint of surprise. A small smile forms as she asks if he's heading to the library again, already handing him a familiar piece of paper. But Abel recognizes it's an exit permit and clarifies that he's actually heading into town this time. Hearing this, her smile falters as she comments that she just processed a similar permit for a student named Eliza. Noticing her change in demeanor, Abel asks if there's a problem, but she's quick to dismiss it as nothing. And yet, a flash of jealousy crosses her face as her fingers slightly crumple the permit in her hand. She then turns away, telling him to have fun in a tone that leaves Abel utterly confused by her strange reaction. But just as he turns to go, Lilith calls out his name one last time. Before he can respond, she suddenly lunges forward and grabs him by the sleeve, stopping him in his tracks. With a desperate, pleading look in her eyes, she asks if he'll go out with her again sometime. All Abel can do is stare back in stunned silence, completely blindsided by her sudden, desperate request. Faced with her insistence, Abel gives in with a simple yes. His answer is all it takes for Lilith to break into a radiant, happy smile. And, as he turns to leave, Abel thinks to himself that she really does have a cute side. After all, even after 200 years of life, she still shows such a childish face at times. Moments later, he finds Eliza and immediately apologizes, asking if she'd been waiting long. But with a friendly smile, Eliza assures him she just got there. She's surprised though, remarking that even he knows how to apologize, which makes him wonder if it's really that strange. Changing the subject with an inviting gesture, she offers to be his guide through the royal capital for the day. Since she seems to know the place so well, Abel readily agrees, telling her he's in her hands. With that settled, Eliza announces their first stop, the observation deck of the ruined memorial clock tower. Soon enough, they're climbing the winding stairs, passing the huge, silent gears of the clock's inner mechanism. Reaching a window near the top, Eliza calls him over to see the incredible view. And as he gets closer, she points toward the horizon, explaining that you can see the ocean from there. Indeed, the panoramic view of the city stretches out below them, meeting the sea in a brilliant line. But then, something in the distance catches Abel's eye. He spots a ship in the ocean and asks what it is, a question that leaves Eliza completely confused. It's a steamboat, she explains, questioning how he could possibly not know that. From her explanation, Abel puts it together, a ship that crosses the sea using magic stone fuel. Which means, if it can be seen so clearly from this far away, the vessel must be massive. A slight smile plays on his lips. This is already shaping up to be a good day for their outing. Later, as they're walking down the street, he points to another strange building and asks Eliza what it is. This time, however, it's Eliza who's at a loss, struggling to find the right words to describe the place. She finally tells him it's called a game center, a name he repeats with obvious confusion. While she explains it's a place for people to spend their free time, Abel's first thought is that it's just a place to burn money. Still, he can't help but ponder how much entertainment culture has developed in such a peaceful era. His curiosity piqued, he suggests they go inside, and to his surprise, Eliza agrees, admitting it's her first time too. Yet as they head for the entrance, neither of them notices the spy drone watching from a lamppost. It silently monitors their movements, tracking them closely. The moment they step inside, they're surrounded by a luxurious, noisy environment packed with game machines. The whole place is alive with the sounds of people enjoying all kinds of electronic games. But then Eliza sees a strange creature by the entrance and lets out a scream of pure terror. Abel has to explain that it's just an imitation infused with magic, which only surprises her more. Completely embarrassed, Eliza steps back and apologizes as Abel just watches her. That's when the skeleton itself speaks, saying it's no big deal, prompting Eliza to shout that she wasn't talking to him. Unfazed, the creature simply points them toward the game section, informing them the roulette area is for adults only. Just then, Eliza's attention is captured by something else. She points to a claw machine, calling out to Abel in excitement. Without waiting for an answer, she runs toward the machine, thrilled by what she's found inside. With a huge smile, she confirms her suspicion, they're minimum monsters. She excitedly explains that she loves this series of plushies, leaving Abel to repeat the name in confusion. It's a collection, she reveals, of legendary magical beasts from the past, just made into much cuter versions. On top of that, there are over 200 types, and the collection is wildly popular among the city's youth. Her eyes sparkling, Eliza points to a specific plushie inside, gushing that she loves that one, Jameis. Abel doesn't get the appeal. It's not what he'd expect to drive girls crazy, but he does think that thing would be incredibly strong in a fight. His comment catches her by surprise, but she agrees instantly, confirming that Jameis was indeed strong. The name triggers a memory for Abel, and he recalls how the real creature's breath turned everything to stone. What a difficult time that was. He continues reminiscing, explaining how its petrifying breath was a problem until they defeated it with wind magic. Through all of this, Eliza just watches him in silence, having no idea what he's talking about, and in that silence, it hits him. He said far too much, and he mentally scolds himself for being so careless. But then Eliza just laughs it off, commenting that even he tells weird jokes like that. A moment later, though, her mood shifts, and she asks if maybe her taste means she's not feminine enough. To this, he immediately says her preference is perfect, because what should be valued most is a person's true essence. His words leave Eliza completely stunned, staring at him, surprised and deeply touched. With a blush spreading across her face, she thanks him, admitting that when he puts it that way, she can't disagree. Her gaze drifts back to the plushie, and she confesses she's starting to like Jameis even more now, which prompts Abel to ask a simple question: do you want it? Flustered and embarrassed, Eliza can only give one answer: of course she wants it. Eliza points at the claw machine, saying it's impossible for that small claw to pick up the big plushie. Using his analytical eyes, Abel performs a structural analysis of the machine's mechanism. He quickly realizes the claw's strength has been intentionally set to be extremely weak. He also notes that the operability of the controls has been deliberately impaired. Abel comments on the store's unscrupulous business practices, leaving Eliza a bit confused. He then says he won't feel bad about what he's about to do, and she asks if he's going to try and win it. With his hands on the controls, Abel declares that mages are the ones who turn the impossible into the possible. After all, he thinks, he's already paid the specified amount in coins. Closing his eyes, Abel concentrates and begins to activate his magic. He opens his glowing eyes and casts a strengthening spell. The machine's claw becomes enveloped in a powerful aura, ready to move. With its magically enhanced strength, the claw firmly grips the Jameis plushie. Eliza watches dumbfounded, unable to believe he's actually pulling it off. The machine announces that the prize has been successfully won. He then bends down to get the plushie that fell into the prize chute. He stands up and hands it to Eliza, asking if this was the one she wanted. With a smile, she happily takes the plushie she wanted so badly. Blushing, Eliza hugs the plushie and says that for now, she'll accept it. Abel then overhears her whispering that she'll cherish it, which leaves him a little confused. Later, 2 plates of beautifully decorated pancakes sit on their table. With her cheeks stuffed full, Eliza exclaims how delicious her dessert is. Eliza then asks if she can try a piece from his plate. Abel reflects that other people's food always looks more appealing, something that time hasn't changed. He cuts a piece of his own pancake and offers it to her, simply saying, "Here." Without any hesitation, Eliza eats the piece directly from his fork. Eliza then asks if Abel wants to try hers too, to which he agrees. So, she brings a fork with a piece of her strawberry pancake to his mouth. Even though he's not a fan of sweets, Abel admits he can eat these pancakes easily. Excited by his reaction, Eliza confirms she knew it and reveals that this is her favorite shop. Abel, however, comments that he finds it intriguing that she doesn't mind the situation, making her curious. Calmly, he explains that he read in a book about the act of putting your mouth where someone else's has already been. Then, Abel asks if that isn't called an indirect kiss, leaving Eliza completely embarrassed. Abel watches Eliza's reaction as he finishes chewing, wondering if she was so focused on the food that she didn't notice. Seeing her panic, he apologizes for saying something unnecessary, but Eliza stammers that's not the case. She then tries to play it off, saying that an indirect kiss is normal and she's not worried about it at all. Abel replies that he understands, and in that case, it's all fine. Calmly, he comments, "The atmosphere of this street seems a bit different from the others." Surprised, Eliza asks if he felt the same way about the place. She adds that the street has a retro feel, but Abel replies that to him, it feels nostalgic. She then points out that there's a difference between finding a scene retro and finding it nostalgic, which surprises Abel. With that, Eliza directly asks who he is, mentioning his fight in the exam and the enchantment on his uniform. She finishes by stating that his abilities are far beyond the level of an average student. In his thoughts, Abel reflects that being a reincarnated mage from 200 years ago is a secret he only wants to share with Lilith. If this information spreads, the risk of getting into trouble will only increase. He concludes his only wish is to live in peace, but then his eyes shift, noticing something. He leans forward and tells Eliza that being watched at school is one thing, but it's unpleasant to be observed even on holidays. In a sudden move, Abel leans over her, looking as if he's about to kiss her. Hidden behind her, he points his finger and conjures a fireball enhanced with projectile speed magic. The next instant, the lamppost down the street explodes, startling Eliza. As she turns around, Abel moves away and casually comments that it was probably just a malfunctioning lamppost. At that, Eliza apologizes for being nosy and asking so many questions. In her thoughts, she begins to admit that she just doesn't want to feel like she's being left out by him. With a flushed face, she finally realizes and confirms to herself that she likes Abel. As they walk back at sunset, he thinks that even after destroying the regalia, he still feels like he's being monitored. Given this, Abel concludes that it might be time to take action. He realizes this whole situation is becoming more and more of a nuisance. Out of nowhere, Abel stops, surprising Eliza by asking her to go on ahead. His excuse is that he forgot something at the last shop and has to go back. Clutching the bear she won, Eliza just smiles and agrees. With a simple goodbye, she tells him she'll see him at school tomorrow. But the moment she's out of sight, his demeanor changes as he turns and slips into a dark alley. Looking up into the shadows, he states plainly that he knows someone is there. In fact, he orders both of them to come out. From the darkness, a sorceress emerges, remarking that he understood their intentions perfectly. She even adds with a smile that she adores smart kids who know to get the girl to safety. Abel immediately analyzes her, deducing her gray eyes are the source of illusion magic that lets her blend in. On top of that, he notes her revealing clothes aren't for show. They increase the precision of that magic. Just then, a voice from above comments that for a mere child to notice them, they must have found a real monster. And with that, a man leaps down from the roof, landing hard in the alleyway. His emerald eyes are a dead giveaway. Abel instantly identifies him as a wind element mage. This newcomer praises Abel's great talent, saying it's just as he's had expected. That word, him, immediately catches Abel's attention, so he demands to know exactly who sent them and what their purpose is. The man offers a hollow apology but quickly states that they are, after all, professionals. As proof, he unsheaths a dagger that immediately begins to glow with wind energy. His partner backs him up, declaring they'll never reveal their client, not even on their deathbeds. And yet, with a subtle smile, Abel finds an opponent with such conviction quite interesting. This kind of resolve only makes him more motivated for the fight to come. The scene shifts to Emerson's memories, where he reflects that in his old world, a human would never bother fighting an insect. For someone like him, a person to discuss magic with as an equal simply didn't exist. In fact, by the time he was just a student, he had already developed his own unique regalia. But this revolutionary talent was only met with mockery from the other students. It was then he realized that overwhelming talent only leads to an inevitable, crushing loneliness. Even upon entering the academy, he tried desperately to make others understand him. But eventually, that effort led to a harsh realization. He finally concluded that it was useless trying to stay on the same level as those he deemed inferior. After all, to polish a diamond, one needs another diamond, or something even harder. He understood that without a mage of equal or greater skill, there was no way to improve. This truth led to an overwhelming stagnation, a life without reason. But now, after witnessing Abel's incredible abilities firsthand, he is inspired. This boy presented entirely new possibilities for his own improvement. For the first time in years, his heart pounded with a new and immeasurable anticipation. To test this diamond in the rough, he hired Musom the illusionist and Bardot of the Gale. Both of them were high-ranking members of the Kronos Magic Society, the very same organization he belonged to. And with this renewed determination, he resolved to do absolutely anything to understand Abel better. But back in his secret surveillance room, Emerson finds Abel already there, drinking calmly amidst the high-tech screens. Without even turning around, Abel thanks him for making the place so comfortable. Completely blindsided, all Emerson can do is stammer out Abel's name. He demands to know how Abel got in, admitting he was caught completely by surprise. After all, he'd placed multiple complex protective barriers all around the room. To which Abel calmly replies that bypassing those barriers felt like tearing a single piece of paper. Hearing this, Emerson can only laugh, once again praising the boy's incredible talent. That's when Abel reveals that the friends Emerson hired told him everything. He even knows Emerson himself was the one controlling the surveillance regalia, a fact that truly shocks him. With the truth laid bare, Abel bluntly orders him to stop the surveillance immediately. Emerson fumes not just because his subordinates lost, but because they completely sold him out. Abel casually adds that some kind of brainwashing magic must have been used, even praising the complex technique. But full of pride, Emerson defiantly asks what will happen if he refuses. In response, a sudden and intense dark energy begins to radiate from Abel, filling the room. Engulfed by this overwhelming aura, Abel's voice drops as he states that in that case, Emerson will die, right here, right now. The sheer pressure from his energy is so crushing that the entire room begins to shake violently. Terrified, Emerson can barely even process the scale of power being unleashed before him. Completely overcome by fear, he finally yells out that he gets the message. Bruised from the pressure alone, Emerson surrenders and accepts Abel's demand. At his surrender, the immense aura around Abel slowly begins to dissipate, and with the calm restored, Abel simply thanks him for his cooperation. Once he's recovered, Emerson has just one question for Abel. Why would someone so powerful choose to stay at this academy, where there's nothing left for him to learn? But Abel's answer is disarmingly simple. His only goal here is to live a peaceful school life. And no, there's absolutely nothing more to his plan than that. Baffled, Emerson asks if it's really just about enjoying his youth, a fact Abel immediately confirms. This can't be real. Emerson is convinced Abel must be messing with him. After all, he declares that Abel's talent is equal to, or perhaps even greater than, his own. With that realization, Emerson takes a heavy step forward, closing the distance between them. He proclaims that with a talent like that, Abel could easily shape the entire world. And after hearing all this, Abel's only response is a long, tired sigh. Then, he shoves Emerson aside, telling him to get out of his way. This pointless talk is a complete waste of time, and Abel has zero interest in it. And with the slam of a door, Emerson is left alone in his trashed office. For a long moment, he just stands there, visibly shaken from the encounter. Because even for a man who has faced countless geniuses, he has never been subjected to such pure, unadulterated killing intent. And his conclusion? It was magnificent. A smile of pure excitement spreads across his face as he whispers Abel's name, because with Abel around, he'll finally have a chance to grow and evolve himself. Later that same night, the scene shifts from the office to the academy dormitory. Here, Eliza learns from Ted that Professor Abel isn't in his room. Ted actually thought Abel would be with her, but admits it's not unusual for him to just disappear. Though Ted offers to pass on a message, Eliza politely declines, figuring she'll just talk to Abel tomorrow. And so, she finds herself sitting alone on a courtyard bench, completely lost in thought. Clutching the little bear he gave her, she thinks about how she only wanted to thank him for the gift. Suddenly, a familiar voice cuts through the silence, asking what someone wants by calling so late. It's Abel. Startled, she immediately ducks for cover behind the bench. From her hiding spot, she then hears a woman's voice, full of apology. Peeking out, she sees the voice belongs to Lilith, who's meeting Abel in a nearby forest clearing. During their talk, Lilith admits she just wanted to hear his voice, an answer that only leaves Abel confused. His tone turns serious as he scolds her, reminding her of his warning to avoid doing anything conspicuous. He suggests that if she really needs to talk, she should do it after class when they both have the time. But instead of agreeing, Lilith does something completely unexpected. She leans in and kisses him on the forehead. While she hugs him, Abel simply comments that she hasn't changed at all, a sight that leaves the watching Eliza utterly horrified. Panicked and unable to process what she just witnessed, her mind can only scream one question: what just happened? The next day, Yukari arrives at a cafe, greeting her friend Eliza with a cheerful hello. That cheer quickly fades, however, when she sees the miserable look on Eliza's face. Leaning in closer, she has to ask if something happened. It's just so strange after all. Eliza loves sweets, yet today she only ordered a single cup of coffee. Prying gently, Yukari asks what's on her mind, offering to help in any way she can. Without beating around the bush, Eliza just comes out with it: she saw something. With the image of the kiss still burned into her memory, she struggles to find the words to explain. Stammering, she finally gets it out: she saw them kissing. Which leads to the one question that has been tormenting her: are Abel and Professor Lilith dating? In that single question, Yukari finally understands everything, including the obvious fact that Eliza has a crush on Abel. Suddenly, she shoots up from her seat with a huge smile, shouting that everything is fine. With total confidence, Yukari assures her there's nothing to worry about, because Abel and Professor Lilith are blood siblings. In fact, even Ted knows about it, though he just considers them a pair of very strange siblings. But Eliza is still in disbelief, arguing that even if they are siblings, their behavior was not normal at all. Her mind replays the scene, the two of them, blood siblings, meeting in secret out in the forest. And then her thoughts stutter to a halt, fixated on the moment they kissed. Tapping her chin, Yukari tries to puzzle out an explanation for her distraught friend. She argues that if they're a very close and tight-knit family, maybe it's not so weird. It's possible, she suggests, that they just express affection with a kiss, the same way they might have as children. Even as she says this, though, Yukari thinks to herself that there are still parts of this story that don't quite add up. But that explanation is more than enough for Eliza. With her hope rekindled, she concludes there are many different kinds of families in the world. Fueled by this newfound energy, she thanks her friend and declares that she's finally gotten her appetite back. And with a huge smile, she points to the menu to order a giant parfait, leaving Yukari terrified of her friend's sudden, monstrous appetite. Meanwhile, back at the academy, the daily training routine is in full swing. And for Abel, this means sticking to his own rigorous physical regimen. It's a practice he knows most modern mages foolishly neglect, viewing it as a treasure thrown to waste. But his peace is suddenly shattered when Ted bursts into the room, shouting that he's finally found his teacher. With a huge smile plastered on his face, he asks if Abel has been hiding out here the entire time. Sighing, Abel switches off the treadmill, lamenting that of all the people who could have found him, it had to be Ted. Now thoroughly annoyed that his sanctuary has been invaded, he cuts straight to the point and asks what Ted needs. Beaming with excitement, Ted immediately asks if he's decided which research group he's going to join. The term sounds vaguely familiar, something Abel recalls hearing mentioned during the entrance ceremony. When Ted accuses him of forgetting, Abel just shrugs, stating plainly that he's simply not interested. Undeterred, Ted launches into an enthusiastic explanation. They're extracurricular clubs for studying magic and regalia. In fact, he's heading to the big recruitment event right now and insists Abel should come along. But Abel immediately shuts him down. It doesn't sound interesting, and Ted should find someone else to go with. Internally, Abel is certain of his decision, because his countless past experiences have taught him one thing. The most efficient way to research magic is to do it completely alone. Yet Ted won't take no for an answer, leaning on the machine and insisting this is a great opportunity. He argues that surely some group there might pique Abel's highly specific interests. He even throws out a guess, suggesting there might be a group for sports or even scraping magic. With a sigh of pure resignation, Abel's resolve finally crumbles under Ted's persistence. He agrees to go after he changes his clothes, a response that fills Ted with absolute delight. Moments later, they arrive at the recruitment event, and Ted is immediately impressed by the bustling, chaotic atmosphere. Amid the cacophony of shouting, it's clear the various groups are split between two major factions, magic and sports. And just then, a loud shout cuts through the noise, getting their immediate attention. They turn to find themselves face to face with an imposing figure clad head to toe in knight's armor. Completely startled, Ted blurts out, wondering why on earth a full-fledged knight is at their academy. But the knight just laughs, pulling off his helmet to reveal it's all just gear for a game. He then compliments Ted's powerful build and asks if he's interested in joining a sport called Army Foot. As the student dives into a rapid-fire explanation of the rules, Ted is left completely dizzy from the information overload. Abel, however, watches calmly and concludes it's just a simple variation of rugby from 200 years ago. Poor Ted awkwardly tries to decline, explaining that while he enjoys working out, this just isn't for him. In a desperate attempt to escape, he deflects the question to his professors, asking what he thinks of the offer. The player glances over, asking if he means the quiet kid with the amber eyes. With a faint, knowing smile, Abel states that he cannot accept the offer and politely declines. He knows exactly why this is happening. In this era, a mage with amber eyes is seen as someone who can barely use magic. That's when the team's captain approaches, booming a question about any new recruits. His teammate whispers that he found a promising freshman, but there's a catch. His amber-eyed friend has to join too. The captain lets out a huge, mocking laugh, declaring that a condition like that would never be accepted. He loudly proclaims that letting an inferior eye join the club would completely ruin their honor. Abel is just annoyed. There was really no need for the captain to say all that right in front of him. So, before things can escalate, he simply flicks Ted on the head and tells him it's time to go. And for good measure, he adds aloud that he isn't interested in playing with the balls anyway. That does it. Absolutely furious, the captain whirls on Abel and demands to know what he just said. Abel calmly repeats himself. He's not interested in playing ball, then asks if he needs to say it a third time. Completely infuriated by this response, the captain bellows at Abel to listen up. He declares he won't tolerate such blatant disrespect from someone so utterly ignorant. But Ted and Abel just stare back, their expressions dead serious. That's all it takes for the captain's armored teammate to stomp his foot and charge directly at Abel. His face contorted in a furious glare, he dares Abel to call it playing with the balls one more time. He then lunges forward, aiming to deliver a powerful, direct hit. However, Abel dodges the attack with ease, and as he moves past, he lands a single, precise kick to the player's feet. The impact is enough to send the heavily armored player stumbling backward, shocking the onlookers. Gritting his teeth, the player curses in pure rage, glaring at the still perfectly calm Abel. He screams that it's not over yet and charges in again, this time with everything he has. Already tired of the commotion, Abel decides to end things right here, peacefully and discreetly. With that thought, he leaps high into the air, declaring that he'll be returning their balls for them. And that's when he unleashes his material reinforcement magic, causing the simple ball to glow with an immense, terrifying power. With impressive force and speed, Abel hurls the ball. The projectile smashes square into the captain's face before he can even react. Such is the force of the throw that it sends the captain flying backward and crashing to the ground. Looking at the result, even Abel has to admit he might have overdone it a bit. While other students swarm Ted with club offers, Abel decides to just hit the gym by himself. It only confirms his suspicion he doesn't need to join any club to reach his goals. But as he turns to leave, a group of hooded figures approaches, inviting him to their anti-magic club in the name of peace. One of them hands him a flyer for something called the Magic Eradication Research Club. The idea intrigues Abel, though he can't help but wonder why they'd enroll in a magic academy just to eradicate magic. That's when he looks closer at their leader and realizes he knows that face. To his surprise, it's Bass, advancing with his sword already drawn. Abel had heard Bass enrolled here, but he certainly didn't expect their reunion to be like this. Later, in the middle of the festival, a voice calls out to a boy with green highlights in his hair. He turns, his expression shifting to surprise when he sees who it is. It's Abel, gesturing for him to come over, much to the guy's confusion. With clear disdain, the boy asks what he wants, stating he has no intention of getting along with him. His tone then turns to disbelief as he asks if Abel has seriously never heard of AMO, the anti-magic organization. He explains that while AMO preaches peace, their methods are known for being rather radical. Calling it a popular social issue Abel should read up on, the guy's condescension only makes him more pensive. With a superior sneer, the boy then calls him an outsider and asks which club he's decided to join. But before Abel can even answer, he scoffs that no one in their right mind would accept someone with an inferior eyes like his. However, Abel simply cuts him off, stating that HE can recommend the perfect club for him. A smile plays on his lips as he tells the guy to follow, assuring him that in this club, he'll be welcomed with open arms. The green-haired boy follows along, figuring since he was heading home anyway, one more disappointment won't make a difference. Upon arriving, Abel simply points to a lone table and says, "This is it." At the table, a blue-haired girl sits completely alone, reading a book under an umbrella. Abel observes the scene, wondering what exactly is wrong with this picture. He quickly notices that everyone else is actively avoiding her, not even daring to glance in her direction. That's when the green-haired guy smirks. "You don't know her, do you?" He introduces her as Noelle, the one girl everyone at the academy avoids. Her nickname, he explains, is the Ice Queen, a title that immediately piques Abel's curiosity. Everyone from prep school knows her well, he continues. Apparently, Noelle is a beast with both brains and brawn, but she makes absolutely no effort to get along with anyone. With a final taunt, the guy suggests they might get along, since birds of a feather flock together. And with that parting shot, he leaves Abel alone to ponder the situation. Abel's gaze drifts to Noelle, and he instantly analyzes her sapphire eyes, which indicate excellence in water attribute magic. So that's where the Ice Queen nickname comes from, and it means she's far stronger than the average student. His eyes finally land on the club's sign, Ancient Magic Research Club, making him wonder what this era even considers ancient. Yet Noelle herself shows no interest in recruiting, she hasn't even acknowledged his presence. So, Abel walks right up and taps the table to get her attention. "Hey." Without emotion, she looks up from her book and replies with a simple, "Yes? I'm interested in the Ancient Magic Research Club," he says. "Tell me about it." She notes he's a first year, just like her, before cutting straight through the formalities. Instead of explaining, she hands him a wooden puzzle box with a simple challenge: solve this. It's a complex cube, covered in intricate carvings and strange mechanisms on every side. The moment he sees it, Abel's focus sharpens, his eyes observing it intently. And as he examines the object, a flicker of recognition hits him. This is a labyrinth runner. He remembers it well, a puzzle specifically designed to test one's ability to analyze complex magical syntaxes. Holding the cube brings a wave of nostalgia, and its complexity tells him this is no off-the-shelf product. Which can only mean one thing: Noelle must have built this labyrinth runner herself. With that realization, he immediately begins analyzing the object's magical syntax. Moments later, he channels his magical power through the correct path, causing the entire cube to glow. With a final click, the box springs open. The puzzle is solved. The blue-haired girl can only stare back, her eyes wide with utter shock. Without wasting a second, Abel hands the now open box back to her. "I solved it." Incredulous, she takes the object, wondering if it's broken. There's no way it could be solved that quickly. It isn't broken, he calmly confirms. I really did solve it. But that's impossible. That puzzle was designed to take at least an hour. Having completed her challenge, Abel presses his point. I did what you asked. Now, tell me about the club. She just stares, her silence a testament to his undeniable skill. Then, finally, she stands and wordlessly leads Abel upstairs, toward the club room. As they approach a door, a particular sign catches his eye. Entry is forbidden for ordinary students. Intrigued, Abel can't help but ask if she's sure this is the right way. But without even turning around, she simply confirms that this is the correct place. And that's when she stops, in front of a smooth, blank wall with no door in sight. With a swift, practiced motion, she pulls a small golden object from her uniform. It's an ancient key, one she holds with a delicate, almost irreverent touch. She then presses it into a nearly invisible hole in the wall, and it slides in perfectly. With a soft click, the glowing outline of a door materializes before them. The magical door swings open, revealing a hidden passageway to an even more hidden room. Upon entering, she announces with a hint of pride, "This is the club room." As she leans against a nearby table, Abel takes a moment to observe the truly vast interior. Looking around, he can't help but comment on the sheer number of books. There must be thousands. For a student club, this room is enormous, which makes him wonder where the other members are. The blue-haired girl's response is blunt, "There's no one else here," leaving Abel completely stunned. In fact, she reveals that until this very moment, she was the sole member of the Ancient Magic Research Club. Suddenly, it all clicks for Abel. If that labyrinth was the entrance exam, it's no wonder a normal student could never pass it. Now deeply curious, he approaches a bookshelf and pulls out one of the many tomes. Flipping through the brittle pages, he realizes just how old these books are. This copy alone is 50 years old. So he asks to see the oldest one she has, and she replies that it's 100 years old. She goes on to explain that most magic books from the past were burned during the Great Calamity. Hearing her explanation, Abel just confirms that he had already figured as much. Because he remembers, over 200 years ago, he and the hero's party defeated the Demon King and finally brought peace to the world. Yet, less than a year later, a dispute over the Demon King's territory ignited a long and brutal war among humans. This war, which would come to be called the Great Calamity, raged for 100 years and brought unprecedented destruction. Noelle explains how this century of conflict exhausted people's minds and bodies, giving rise to powerful anti-magic beliefs. Because of this growing fear and paranoia, she continues, magic boats from all over the world became a target. And as a result, they were all systematically burned to ashes. She concludes that this event made the very act of book burning a taboo, which is why the magic of the current era is so tragically inferior. And that, Noelle declares, is the purpose of this research club, to learn the great magic that once existed in ancient times. Abel can't help but admire the noble sentiment that drives her. After all, he knows that most people in this era don't even realize their magic is in a state of deep decline. To him, the simple fact that Noelle understands the current situation is proof enough that she's an excellent mage. Surprised by his earnest reaction, she asks if he won't laugh at her goal, but Abel just wonders why he would. So she explains how others have told her that modern magic, which uses regalia, is much more convenient. Since that was considered normal, Noelle, who exclusively researches ancient magic, was treated as a weirdo by other mages, leaving her completely isolated. In a firm, serious tone, Abel states that he won't be one of them, he will not laugh at her efforts. Hearing his answer, she just observes him in silence for a long moment before calling him peculiar. Then, in a much friendlier tone, she finally asks for his name, and he introduces himself as Abel. In return, the girl introduces herself as Noelle. And with that, she hands him the key to the room, officially welcoming him into the club. The very next day, the routine at the academy continues on as usual. At the end of class, Abel tries to wake up Ted, who is fast asleep on a pile of books. He decides to just leave his friend be, figuring he's completely exhausted from being relentlessly chased by all the sports clubs. But just as he leaves the classroom, Eliza calls out his name, stopping him in his tracks. With an excited glint in her eye, she asks if he has decided which research group to join yet. Before he can even respond, Eliza invites him to check out a research club with her after class tomorrow. She confesses she's never ridden the dragon and has always wanted to, eagerly inviting him to come along. Looking at the pamphlet she's holding, Abel sees it's for the Dragonflight Research Club. He reflects that he hasn't seen a single dragon since he was reincarnated, and it's been a while since he's played with them. With that thought, Abel accepts her invitation, much to Eliza's utter shock and delight. As she runs off down the hall, she makes him promise not to go back on his word. Suddenly, Abel senses something strange and stops for a moment. When he turns around, he finds Emerson standing there, right in the middle of the hall. Abel's friendly demeanor vanishes as he demands to know what he's doing there. Emerson greets him with a disarming smile, but Abel has no time for pleasantries and demands an answer. To his surprise, Emerson reveals he's the official advisor for the Ancient Magic Research Club. He insists he's just observing now and then, claiming to have no ulterior motives whatsoever. When Emerson then asks what business Abel has here, our hero simply states he needs to use the room. At that, a mischievous smile spreads across Emerson's face as he claims to understand the situation perfectly. He's jumped to a wildly wrong conclusion that the club's only member, Noel, must have a crush on Abel. Suggesting they talk, Emerson launches into an explanation, leaving a confused Abel no choice but to listen. It turns out Noelle was enrolled on the headmaster's personal recommendation and is the only first year with a special class exemption. In fact, her abilities already surpass many of the teachers, so no class can actually meet her needs. That's why the academy gave her this secret library, a place where she could study entirely on her own. With that story finished, Emerson then offers to recommend Abel for the very same exemption. But Abel flatly refuses, stating his one and only goal is to live a peaceful student life. Hearing this, Emerson points out the glaring contradiction, asking why he's getting involved with a girl everyone else avoids. Abel defends himself, insisting his interest is only in the library's ancient books, not in Noel herself. Yet this is also a contradiction, Emerson argues, since seeking forbidden ancient magic is the exact opposite of a peaceful life. He tells Abel it would be far easier to just mind his own business and stay away. Suddenly, Emerson steps forward, his hand reaching out to touch Abel's face. With a final cryptic smile, he wishes Abel good luck before taking his leave. Back at the door, Abel reflects on the strange, tingling sensation left behind by Emerson's touch. A smirk forms on his face as he discovers what it really was, a spying spell planted right on his shoulder. As a precaution against any other traps, he decides to scan the room before heading inside. He pushes the door open to find Noelle already sitting inside, startling her. The girl immediately jumps to her feet, clearly surprised by his sudden appearance. As Noel walks toward him, Abel can only bow apologetically for barging in. But she just calmly calls his name, telling him that she's been waiting. Her almost puppy-like eagerness makes Abel wonder if she's some kind of tame pet. Noel says she's here as promised, and excitedly asks what he wanted to show her. Before he can answer, she turns and pulls a heavy wooden box from a nearby bookshelf. Opening the box reveals an ancient, dusty tome nestled within. Noel proudly hands it over, explaining that she brought this from her home just for him. As Abel takes the heavy book, he immediately notices the distinct burn marks scarring its cover. On top of that, he sees a complex magical syntax sealing the book shut, making it nearly impossible to open. With a solemn tone, Noel reveals the book's name, the Akashic Records. The name instantly rings a bell, a legendary title Abel recognizes from the history books. As the legends say, whoever learns the magic contained within its pages gains the power to control the very world. When Abel asks why she'd bring something so ridiculously valuable, she simply says it's because he wanted to read old books. Her incredibly casual attitude leads Abel to wonder if she's secretly royalty, or at least high nobility. One thing is for sure, she is no ordinary student and must have had an incredibly special upbringing. Calling the book her personal treasure, Noelle declares that she will only ever show it to Abel. Upon finally opening it, Abel is immediately impressed by the sheer precision of the magic formulas inside. While the burn marks make it difficult to read, he can still make out several key passages. He reflects that even back in his own time, 200 years ago, he can't imagine who could have written formulas this complex. But as he continues to analyze it, the writing style feels uncannily familiar, as if he wrote it himself. That's when his eyes land on a specific dedication, to my dear comrade, Daytona. Testing a theory, he asks Noelle if the book is a family heirloom, and she confirms it came from her family's storehouse. She goes on to explain that her ancestor, from 200 years ago, received it from a skilled mage he greatly respected. With that final piece of the puzzle, everything clicks into place for Abel. Noel just looks at him hopefully, asking if he can actually read what's written inside. Closing his eyes for a brief moment, Abel simply lets out a non-committal, well, but in his mind, the answer is absolute. Of course he can read it, because he's the one who wrote it. He knows this book was written in an ancient language that, while standard in his time, is now nearly impossible to decipher. To test just how much she knows, Abel points to a page and casually mentions it's a chapter on resurrection magic, leaving Noel stunned. Observing her shocked face, Abel sees the spitting image of the Daytona he knew in his youth. He is now 100% certain that this girl, Noel, is a descendant of that legendary water heroine. Completely in awe, Noelle begs him to teach her more about the book's incredible contents. However, Abel apologizes, saying they have to stop for now since curfew is approaching and he has other plans. She reluctantly agrees, but only on the condition that he lets her use the room again in the future. With a kind smile, Abel not only agrees, but also promises to teach her how to read the book next time they meet. At the mention of a promise like that, Noel's face lights up with pure, unadulterated shock and joy. Clutching the book to her chest, she happily agrees to their arrangement. And so, the very next day after class, they find themselves standing before the dragon hangar. But before they can even process where they are, a group of young men greets them with roses, welcoming them to the Dragonflight Research Club. It's at this moment that he and Eliza share a look of pure horror, wondering if they'd made a terrible mistake. Just then, a man with a wide smile steps forward, capturing the attention of all the new recruits. He thanks everyone for coming, inviting them all to simply relax and have fun together. Still in shock, Abel and Eliza can't help but wonder if this is the right club at all. These members look nothing like Dragon Knights. After all, Abel knows that caring for a dragon is grueling work, as they are proud creatures with massive appetites. He simply can't imagine these frivolous kids having what it takes to care for such a powerful being. Sensing his disapproval, Eliza turns to him with an apology, admitting she had no idea the club members would be like this. But before he can answer, a girl raises her hand with a question, which the leader flirtatiously allows. She wants to know the difference between their club and the Dragon Knight Research Club right next door. Praising the question, the leader grins and says the biggest difference is probably their vibe. He explains that their main goal is just to have fun, without any of the usual formalities. In fact, he declares that whether they ride dragons or not, everyone is free to enjoy themselves however they want. This strikes Abel as bizarre. In his era, dragons were precious strategic resources, not tools for mere pleasure. And yet, he has to admit, this strange new reality is also proof that the world has become much more peaceful. His thoughts are cut short when the club leader enthusiastically announces that it's finally time for everyone to start riding dragons. The first instruction is for all the new recruits to pair up with the senior members. That's when Abel notices it. He's the only new male visitor, and all the senior members are guys. A headache starts to form as he realizes they're actually using dragons as a tool for dating. And to prove his point, the club leader immediately approaches Eliza, telling her how happy he is that she came for him. Flustered, she awkwardly agrees but is quick to point out that she's here with a friend. Ignoring her comment completely, he turns back to Eliza and invites her to ride a dragon with him. But she quickly grabs Abel's arm, insisting that she actually wanted to ride with him today. The leader just smiles, explaining that won't be possible since the dragons only seat 2 people. Abel despises how they're using these magnificent creatures, but he also knows how much Eliza was looking forward to this day. So, putting her feelings first, he tells her not to worry about him and to just go have fun. For a moment, she just stares back at him, her face flushed and utterly silent. Then, she reluctantly agrees but turns away with a flash of annoyance that leaves Abel completely baffled. He doesn't understand why she's upset, he was only trying to be considerate of her feelings. Left behind, Abel wanders into the barn, where a strong familiar smell immediately brings back memories. He recalls that one of the biggest differences between dragons and other animals is their shocking consumption of energy. Just to maintain its massive body and the power of flight, a single adult dragon needs 300 kilos of food every day. And as a consequence, the sheer amount of droppings means a keeper could spend their entire day just cleaning up after one. Meanwhile, the club leader proudly draws Eliza's attention toward one of the cages. He introduces his favorite dragon, an imposing blue specimen named Saint Glory. Eliza is absolutely stunned, admitting she's never seen a dragon so large in her entire life. Even from a distance, Abel has to agree it's a fine specimen. Back in his era, a dragon like that was reserved only for nobles and royalty. For a while, he'd been worried that the decline of magic in this new age might have weakened the dragons. But seeing this magnificent creature, he realizes that in the last 200 years, the research into raising them might have actually improved. Noticing Abel's silent admiration from afar, the club leader strolls over and calls out to him. He gestures vaguely, telling Abel the other dragons are in the back and that he can pick whichever one he likes best. With that business handled, he immediately turns back to Eliza, inviting her to finally enjoy their journey through the skies. She reluctantly agrees, though her eyes drift back towards Abel one last time, but he remains silent. He watches wordlessly as the two of them walk away and leave the barn together. Now alone, he turns his attention to a large wooden door at the far end of the stable, deducing his own dragon is behind it. But before he can reach it, a keeper spots him and shouts out, demanding to know what he's doing there. In a panic, the man warns him that the dragon in that room, Leonhardt, absolutely despises humans. He pleads with him not to go in there carelessly, yet Abel just stares at the door, his gaze perfectly calm. "It's fine," Abel replies, adding that he actually wanted to see this very dragon. Sighing, the caretaker relents, deciding it'll be quicker to just show him the danger and invites him inside. Together, they push open the heavy door and carefully step into the darkened stable. For a moment, even Abel is taken aback by the sight that greets him. Chained within, a massive, aggressive red dragon throws its head back and lets out a deafening roar. Its gaze is pure hatred, a long scar running across one eye as it stares them down with open hostility. And yet a slow smile spreads across Abel's face as he praises the magnificent dragon standing before him. The caretaker explains that Leonhardt is their oldest dragon, over 100 years old, and once a famous champion on the racing tracks. Now, he continues, some people are suggesting it would be better to simply put him down. But the caretaker insists that Leo is actually beloved by the younger dragons, making his own job much easier. And because of that, he declares with conviction that he can't let Leo be put down until a new rider is found. So as Abel nears the cage, the caretaker warns him not to enter, since any agitation could bring back talk of putting Leo down for good. Abel, however, realizes that if the other dragons are so well behaved, it can only mean Leonhardt is still the strongest. He also figures such a prideful dragon would never obey a useless human, so he decides to hide his true strength for the time being. With his plan set, he shows his respect by formally addressing the ancient dragon, Leonhardt. Then, in a gesture of trust, he slowly reaches his hand through the bars of the cage. The dragon just watches him through its scarred eye, completely wary of this boy's approach. This sends the caretaker into a panic, who screams for Abel to get back, asking if he didn't hear a single word he said. In response, Abel simply puts a finger to his lips, signaling for the man to be quiet. After a tense moment, the great beast finally rises and slowly walks toward the boy. Looking it dead in the eye, Abel says the dragon must feel trapped, inviting him to come outside for some fun. That's when a voice enters his mind. The dragon's asking if the boy wants to test his mana. Abel simply nods. With nothing more than a simple gesture, he materializes a glowing sphere of pure mana in his palm. Suddenly, a powerful wave of energy bursts from that sphere, leaving the caretaker completely shocked. Overwhelmed by this immense power, the ancient dragon immediately lowers its head in submission. Stunned, the caretaker can only stammer as he watches the fearsome Leonhardt bow before Abel. Now in command, Abel tells the dragon that this caretaker is a man who can be trusted. Following this counsel, Leo obediently approaches the caretaker, who stares back in utter shock and fear. Flabbergasted, the man finally stammers out a single desperate question: who is Abel, really? Abel just smiles, claiming he's only a student who'll be borrowing Leonhardt for a bit. Meanwhile, far from the dragon pens, Eliza is soaring through the sky on the back of a blue dragon. After they land, she tells the club leader how amazing it is that dragons can take them to secluded places like this. In the back of her mind, however, she can't help but wish Abel were there with her to make it more fun. But before she can get lost in that thought, the club leader suddenly grabs her from behind. Startled, Eliza drops her cup of tea and yells at him to wait. She demands to know what he's doing and tells him to stop, but he just has the nerve to call her cruel. Playing dumb, he asks what she could possibly mean, disgustingly implying this is exactly why she came here. To make it worse, he accuses her of coming alone with a boy while flaunting her body. Furious, Eliza cuts him off, but he only taunts her with a vulgar comment about her lower eye. That's the last straw. She angrily declares that a vile man like him is a complete disgrace to the nobility. In the very next moment, she surrounds him with flames and screams for him to prepare himself. Yet before her attack can land, she suddenly collapses, just as the club leader notes the drug has finally kicked in. Lying helpless on the ground, the horrifying realization dawns on her: the tea was poisoned. The senior boasts about his top grades in magical alchemy, sadistically asking how it feels to be completely unable to move. With a malicious grin, he steps closer, whispering that now, they can finally have some fun. Just then, a massive red dragon dives down from the sky at incredible speed, and riding on its back is Abel, casually praising Leo's speed, remarking that very few dragons from his own era were this fast. As he flies overhead, his eyes catch something strange on the ground below. He sees the club leader on top of a girl who looks alarmingly like an unconscious Eliza. In her desperation, the girl can only cry out for help, calling out Abel's name. Hearing this, the senior just grins, saying that the dragon Abel borrowed was the worst of the lot anyway. He even compares Eliza to that dragon, sneering that they both have enormous pride and love to put up a fight. With a mocking smile, he suggests Abel was probably eaten by now, since he never even saw the boy fly properly. This gives Eliza a burst of fury, and she curses at him, screaming for him to get off of her. But he just whispers for her to be a good girl so he can be nice to her.